All right. Uh, Lex and Pete Show, season 4 premiere. We're hopping on real quick. We're going to have Tyler Amaral joining us later. We're going to get into some draft talk, really open up draft season with our, I guess I'd call it our big boards. We're not doing like the full 40 or anything like that. Just our preliminary positional rankings. At the time of this recording, the combine, I believe, is in 2 weeks, maybe exactly 2 weeks. I think it's the very end of February, maybe start of March. I think it actually might start and then carry over into that. But so that'll be like the real start of the actual draft season. We want to just kind of get some takes out there, talk about who our guys are. But overall, we're just kind of just listen names that we like. We're going to learn a lot more throughout the whole process. We are here now to talk about some of the trades that have gone on. All three involve Slippery Pete. One involves me, and then of course there are other teams in the league as well. So there's a lot to react to there. But first, we will start with a word from our sponsors. As always, Sundog Multimedia. Sundog is an online communication and social media company. What started as a personal tool has since evolved into something much bigger, allowing users to communicate, research, and discover things that impact their lives and daily decisions. Sundog will collaborate with you to build and execute a modern yet nimble social media strategy by utilizing innovative and traditional media principles. Sundog is also a proud supporter of the Stop Soldier Suicide Foundation. You can follow Sundog on Instagram at sundog underscore multimedia. That's Instagram at sundog underscore multimedia. Brains, brawn, and true professionalism. That's easy peasy moving and service. Muscle for hire, moving, assembly, errands, you name it. They will do it. Easy peasy is a multi service team. If you need something, just ask. Finally back after a very long break, a long hiatus. Of course, we did move up the start of the trade market opening by what, a week?
Yep.
Was it a week? Yeah, so we did that by a week, and you know, I think, I always kind of chirp everybody and say, hey, you beg for this, you beg for the trade market to open, all this stuff, and then we always end up waiting for things. So I feel like there's a lot of over promising, under delivering by a lot of people making the demands. But I think that this year did not disappoint. I think right away, right? As soon as the clock struck 12, we made a deal,
Fireworks.
us two and the Zits. And then shortly after that, I mean, we're what, only 2 weeks, only, no, not even a week and a half past that, and we've had 4 trades, 5 trades league wide. So a lot of big stuff going on. But we're here to just talk about the big 3 trades. We were talking about what did we want to discuss. Mikey and McMo, they did make a trade. It was Andrews for what, some for a first round or some picks, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Everybody knows that was a deal that was going to be made at the deadline. Of course, despite my obsessive warning of this happening. Somehow they actually ran out of time at the trade deadline. I never thought we'd see that. But that was truly a deal that they were about to make.
Right.
And the game ended. They couldn't get
The
it done.
time.
I can't believe that actually happened. Just two dummies that finally made their deal. They got what they wanted. So we'll talk more about what McMorrow got in that, because he is building up his stash of 2025 first. But we're going to start with the big trade here. It was us, so Slippery Pete, Finesse Bebe Jones, the Zits. The big pieces here, I don't know. I mean, I guess everybody kind of knows the trade. I'm not going to read the whole thing. The big pieces
Yeah.
here were Anthony Richardson, the 3rd overall pick, Jackson Smith and Jigba, and then Bowen, threw in, this 14th pick, DeAndre Swift, he gave up. So a couple things like that. How do you want to attack it, Pete? I guess maybe talk about it from your side. Maybe take us a little behind the scenes of what went down, because we both know that there was somebody else that was involved in that deal, and they
Yep.
unfortunately missed out. But Bowen just came right in. He kind of saved the day. He gave us that 3rd member that we needed to really get this deal done. How are you feeling about the trade? You finally got Anthony Richardson. I know that there was some regret based off of how the start of his rookie season went, how Bryce Young's overall rookie season went. I know that you have that smoke screen going up into the draft saying that you're going to take him. So you finally got your guy. How are you feeling?
Yeah, it feels good. I mean, first of all, it just feels good to get back on the mic. Lex and Pete, season four, Malik sweatshirts on. I'm feeling good, ready to take off. But yeah, this trade was right and a wrong from last year's draft. Obviously, I was standing on a hill ready to die for Bryce Young. He even went as far to trash Anthony Richardson and said that I didn't want him, probably out of spite. But this trade was really righting a wrong. To kind of peel the curtain back, you and I have been talking about a deal something like this for at least like a month, probably, right?
Well, really, we were talking about it since the deadline.
Yeah,
You know,
since the yeah,
we
you're right.
had something that was like pretty close, but at the time, it wasn't enough to really get me to make the deal because I wanted to shop him around. I wanted to see
Right.
what else was out there. I knew that, especially the more time that passed, was actually better for me with Anthony Richardson because we were getting further and further away from the injury, closer to his full recovery. So, you know, I wanted to wait and see. I wasn't ready to make the deal. It didn't knock my socks off. I mean, I guess looking back, you know, Puka Nakua was in the mix there. So,
Right.
you know, maybe in hindsight, if I knew that he would explode like that to end the year, then maybe I would have been a little more open. But I still wanted to shop him around, and you know, eventually we all came back to that. And I mean, really, what was going to happen, and I had an honest moment with you where I said I was like, you know, you want Ant, and a lot of people are going to want him. And I have no problem. I do not view myself as a loser if I end up having to keep him because I can't find a deal that I want. So I'm never going to go down to your price. You're always going to have to come up to my price. Maybe you can knock my price down a little bit, but I was never going to go to what your sort of final offer was. I was always going to need more, and I wasn't afraid to just end up holding on to Ant anyways. So we finally got to that, and you know, I referenced it when I was introducing the deal, but we had Mikey Bow, and it felt like we had something solid there. We reached out, we told him, you know, what would you think if you traded Rashad White and you got this return? And at the time, that's all he knew, but he seemed pretty interested in that return that he was going to get, and it was pretty similar. I think it was exactly what Bowen got, right? It was Jameson Williams in that
And
14th
that
pick. So
exactly.
he was going to get that for Rashad White. That's like what he was going to get. And I said to you, I was like, well, okay, that's good. I'm worried to show him the deal because he is a little bit of a pocket watcher. And I was scared that once he saw that he was the clear third wheel here, he was a facilitator. Anthony Richardson, third overall pick, JSN, he wasn't getting any of those. I felt like he was going to get a little envious there and suddenly just not be interested. And
Right.
uh, I was right. That's exactly what happened. We showed him after seemingly being interested in his return, in the exact same return. Once he saw that full deal, suddenly, oh, Rashad's not on the block. We really like him. Mind you, this is 12 days after you know, he
We
had
put him
put
on the block.
Rashad White on the block. I think we had opened these trade talks up with him like 5 days, maybe a full week. So this idea that he wasn't on the block when we started reaching out is crazy because it's like, so you put him on there for a couple days for what? What'd you do that for? So
Right.
I do think that it came down to what I was saying. I think Mikey's a bit of a pocket watcher, and when it comes to these three-team deals, he's not really reliable in that situation because if he's not getting the star role in that trade, I just don't think he's going to be interested. So, what are your thoughts on Mikey kind of fucking himself out of the deal? Because I think it was unfortunate
I
for him.
mean, I think you read him like a book. Like I think he specifically put on Rashad White on the block looking for a first round pick. And like Jameson Williams in 2-2, yeah, it's not a first round pick, but it's pretty close in value, if not already there. So like you and I weren't trying to shortchange him by any means. We were like looking for after you and I went back for about, I don't know, a month back and forth, and we figured that we kind of needed a third team to facilitate getting this deal done. We were like, Mike is Rashad White's on the block. We can get him close to a first value of what he's looking for. Like we weren't trying to get him in any way. It wasn't a gotcha moment. And that's how he was kind of acting, as if we were like predatory using him. And then Bowen swooped in and made it happen. So I don't know. I think Mikey, like, he's going to tell himself he didn't want to make the deal anyway, but I don't have a lot of hope for him in the future if he can't make moves like that and pull the trigger.
Yeah, the thing I kept saying to him is like, you've named your price, and you know, you're kind of just looking at it like, you know, you're obsessed with almost getting 4 or 5 picks better than the pick he was getting in that trade while he was
Exactly.
also getting Jameson Williams, who he said he likes a lot. We were trying to really just hammer that with him and say, like, you know, you're not going to get this asking price for
Right.
Rashad White. So you're going to have to concede a little bit if you're actually looking to move him. And, you know, I just didn't think that that was, you know, that big of a drop. Like I said, we're talking 5, maybe 6 picks that he's looking at for a drop. But, you know, the price of that is Jameson Williams. So, you know, looking at it from my side, you know, it was a move that I was really interested in making. One, because I get that third pick. Two, because I think both of us kind of sense it, and then we just saw it with the Zits and the receivers that they have. I feel like the league meta is kind of shifting towards being receiver heavy. I think that having two really, it doesn't have to be nasty quarterbacks. Of course, if you have them, that's going to help. But I think having two reliable quarterbacks that can kind of get you top 15 finishes each week or most weeks, and then really loading up at receiver is kind of starting to become the new move and the new strategy with this league. So I was really looking to fill out my lineup, and that was my intentions with trading Ant. It was like, I don't want to do that unless I feel like I'm putting myself in a position to have a full starting lineup next year that I think can be at the very least competitive because my team is still very young. So as long as I can take that step up and just be competing weeks, and even if my record's not good, or even if overall I still finish with like the ninth or 10th most points or something, if I'm competing in those weeks, then that's really all I'm looking for. So, getting guys like JSN to go into my flex position, knowing, putting my trust in Levis to be my QB2 with Kyler Murray as my QB1, and then having that third overall pick and the flexibility that comes with it, because if I don't feel like Levis is the guy, which currently I do, I really like what Callahan coming in. I think that that's a good investment in him, and I think that the comments that the owner of the Titans has been making and everything about the direction they want to go in, I feel really confident in Levis going forward. I think that at the very least, I think I can figure out my QB3 situation to have something to lean back on. But if any of that confidence wavers, I have that third pick where you made the trade that we'll talk about in a little bit, but it sounds like you're going Marv with that first overall pick. I'm going to have my pick of, it could be Caleb Williams. It could be Drake May. It could be Jaden Daniels. Two of those three are going to be available for me at the third overall pick. So if I feel like Levis isn't going to be trustworthy at quarterback, I can go in that direction. If I'm in love with a guy like Roma Dunze or a guy like Malik Neighbors, I can grab them and I can put them into that flex spot for me. And then, that I feel like that really rounds out my lineup. So I feel really good about that. Getting a guy like Swift to go with, to pair with Cook and not go too heavy. I've said I don't want to invest too heavy at the running back position, but getting them at the price that I've gotten them at. So, trading Cook for Jerome Ford, getting Swift in this deal, having two, pretty solid starting running backs there. I feel like I've really filled out my lineup and I've done what I was looking to accomplish with trading Ant. So I'm feeling good about my side. You got any comments on either my side or Bowen's side, the direction that
Yeah,
either of us are
I
going in?
guess. Well, like first, I would say like you kind of hit it on the nail on the head in the beginning that like this kind of had to be an overpay for me. Like you're not looking to sell Ant, you're not going to sell him for equal value. Like I'm going to get my guy here. I do have to overpay, so I was comfortable overpaying a little bit. I think a lot of the feedback I would get from any manager who saw that trade was why not just use 1-3 to draft Jaden Daniels, Drake May, like you said, and then you obviously have the profit of JSN not losing him. But I felt like Ant was the guy to have a top five upside. Like because you have Kyler, you kind of had that one guy that was solid on your roster you could trust. He's going to probably be a top 10 quarterback with top five upside. I was looking at Bryce Young and Deshaun Watson. Like there's no real confidence in my QB room at all going into the season. And I'll kind of get into it later, but I think my roster running back through wide receiver tight end is kind of built now for this like 2-3 year window. And it was kind of on me. Like I felt the pressure to make moves for quarterbacks to even give myself a chance to make the playoffs and make a run with the current running back, wide receiver, tight end room I have. So I was comfortable overpaying. I think 1-3 was going to go in this deal no matter what. And then to give JSN as the overpay, I'm okay with given the rest of my wide receiver room. So that was kind of how I was looking at it. With your team, I think you absolutely crushed this deal. I think you absolutely crushed this deal. The running back room was kind of like the one easy call out for the Strokers. And now you've put together Swift and Cook. You almost like fell backwards into it. Like you weren't even really trying to go for these guys. You picked them up as almost add-ons to bigger deals that now have rounded out a full running back room. So I love the deal for you the most. I think I overpaid, but I got my guy, so I got to feel good about it. And then, Bowen was just kind of the facilitator in here that hopped in and threw Swift for JMO in the second. So
Yeah, Bowen just kind of, you get
kind
something to play with. You
yeah,
got that pick that it's essentially it's the end of the first, beginning of the second. So
right.
he's gonna have some good prospects there to pick, and then just taking a flyer on Jameis. That's a guy I like Jameson Williams. I think that he brings a lot to the table, but to me it just didn't feel like enough to be that third leg of the deal because I mean you look at it and Amon-Ra is already there and he's crushing it. He's one of the best receivers in the league.
Top option.
Florida quickly
That's it.
broke out, and he's one of the
Yep.
best tight ends in the league. So it's like,
Jameer
when I'm
Gibbs.
looking at a fantasy team, you almost have to think, well, okay, is he one of the top two? He's not even one of the top two targets. So, maybe he's going to have his massive weeks where, we've seen that big play ability that he's flashed, but it just didn't feel reliable enough to me. I needed something that I felt like I could lean on a little bit more. And Swift was that guy. And I think getting him and being able to insert him into my starting lineup too was really helpful because then it allows me to bump Charbonnet back to my bench. Keaton Mitchell, of course, hopefully comes back, playing just the same after that injury that he had. But not needing one of those guys to be my starting running back each week, I think is going to be
Big,
huge for me because
really
now
big.
it's just like gravy if they do break out. And I think that, putting that together, it makes me a lot more competitive. It's exactly what I set out to do. But yeah, I mean, I think that kind of covers everything for that side of the deal. But yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, with Ant, it was just, you went out and got him, and you have that pair. So maybe Pittman stays, and you have that full stack of Jonathan Taylor as well. But you're going to get a lot of touchdowns out of what's probably going to be a at least in the top half of scoring for the offense for the NFL. So, getting those rushing touchdowns, even if JT does start having his touchdowns vultured by Ant, you're the one that profits off of that. So I
right,
think just
right.
rounding that out, you obviously believe a lot in that Colts
Steichen.
offense and
Yep.
Steichen. So yeah, I mean, I think going for that, it was a move that's worth it for you because now look at your starting lineup, right? So I think it was a good deal on all three sides. All right, let's hit that next one. We're just kicking me out of it, and it's you in the Zits. This is easier to read. You got Tua, and you got the
Geelong.
Suns
Yep.
2025 first, and you gave up Bryce Young in the fifth overall pick. I think the headline here, and it's what needs to be addressed, and you have, kind of apologized for your
Yeah.
horrendous takes back in the day, but I think I said it in our group chat. It felt like the high school bully realizing that he's actually in love with the nerd that he picked on. And that's what happened here. You now, after all the shit you talked, and I'm letting a lot of the stuff you said about Anthony Richardson slide.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
all the shit that you talked about Tua and he's your starting quarterback, what are you gonna say for
I
yourself?
mean, literally both of them. Like I ran my mouth and talked shit about both these dudes on
These are
multiple
like the two
episodes.
quarterbacks that you've probably hated the most in our
Yeah,
dynasty.
exactly. Exactly. I cannot believe I own Tua Tagovailoa. I cannot believe it. By no means was I searching for this trade to happen. My goal, like right in this offseason, was to get two quarterbacks that could give me a top 10 finish. Once the Ant deal got done, I felt like, okay, I got Ant. He's got top 5 upside if he explodes with the rushing, explodes with his rushing ability, but I still think he's going to come in top 10. I need another top 10 quarterback. Then the idea of trading 1-1 kind of came in, trading for 1-1 kind of came into the picture. So this deal is kind of almost tied to the next one. And we'll get to it with the next one. But like McMorrow was so set on buying 25 firsts. Like the value on 25 firsts in McMorrow's economy shot up like an insane amount. Like it became the best bargaining chip to work with him. So when Bowen just shot this deal out of nowhere, I think the original offer was Bryce Young and a second, or no, Tua in a second for Bryce Young and 1.5, and I didn't love it. But once I countered. We didn't even talk about it. I countered with that 25 first, and he accepted it right away. So this deal was kind of twofold. It was one, get a quarterback and give me a top 10 upside, which Tua QB9 last year, and then also get another 25 first to facilitate the next trade. So as much as I like hate that I traded Bryce Young as arguably his lowest value possible, my roster is built for this 2 to 3 year window. Bijan's in his prime. Jonathan Taylor's on his second contract, so maybe a little after his prime, but still locked in for 3 years. CD Lamb prime. Garrett Wilson's getting Aaron Rodgers back. I got Pitts and Njoku now. Pitts has got a new OC. I think there's life there in Atlanta now. Michael Pittman's about to get another contract extension in his prime. Puka's going off as a rookie. Like I felt like my roster is now built to compete. And sure, I love Anthony Richardson. I think he's going to be a top 5 talent one day, but I needed a second quarterback to give me a chance in these playoffs. And it is impossible to trade for a quarterback in this league. I must have texted almost every single team in this league looking for anyone in the top 10. And people just aren't interested in moving the quarterbacks. Like it doesn't matter if you're really willing to overpay that much, unless you're like giving up a 1-3 like I did in the Ant deal, you're just not going to get a top 10 quarterback. So as much as I hated selling Bryce's lowest value and giving up 1.5, I felt good getting the 25 first back to facilitate the next deal. And I felt like Tua was the best quarterback option I could get to give me that top 10 quarterback upside for QB2.
Yeah, I mean, I think it really was, and I think it's something that a lot of teams just don't want to accept. But you have to give something up to
Yeah,
get something of value,
have to,
right? You got to burn to earn all that stuff,
especially if it's a
right? So
quarterback.
a lot of times you reach out to teams and they're just hoping that they can get a really good player for absolute dog shit.
Right.
And that's just like not going to happen. So it's like you wanted to go out and you wanted to get a guy. And yeah, it sucks that you had to kind of give up on the Bryce Young experiment so quickly, but at the same time, you're getting a good player back. And that was something, I had a little tussle with the Suns when I was shopping around Ant, where it's like I was saying, well, yeah, it would cost like this, and this, and it's like, I don't know, like I don't know if I want to give up a late first, on top of everything to do that because we want to be in the draft. It's like, well, you are getting Anthony Richardson
Right.
in this deal. Like we can't forget that. And so, I have to remind myself that sometimes too, where it's like, yeah, you want to be right on this player and you want it to happen on your team, but it's just like, you gave up Bryce Young, but you got to it. You got a guy that you know what he is. You know that he's a top 15 fantasy quarterback, pretty much locked in. Like I think his floor is being like, you know, a high end QB2. And, some weeks he can go off for 25, 30 points. I think when he was on my team, he had a 40-point week almost.
Yep.
So it's like you got that. And then, like you said, you also got a first out of it to help facilitate that next deal. I will say, you traded both your first round picks. Is that a sign of how you feel about this draft, or was that just the price of doing business?
It was the price of doing business. 1.5. I don't think there's going to be a quarterback there at 1.5 that like I'm ready to go with. And I wasn't even willing to roll the dice on a QB at 1.3. Like I want guys who are proven in the NFL, who have shown me they can put up the points in the NFL, and are going to facilitate me getting to the playoffs this year with the elite core I feel like I do have right now. So
Yeah, because I
like it
think
does
part of it
suck, but
too.
like
I think
it
part
was
of it too is
necessity.
that like CJ Stroud, he just put up like a historic rookie season. Like
Unprecedented.
that's like not something that just happens. And I think
No,
that a lot of people have, maybe overlooked that it's like, yeah, you did just get this really good quarterback prospect, but he's probably being drafted to a bad team, so they have bad weapons. And he also has to learn about the NFL. So it's like there is that learning curve for guys to really step up. And like not everybody's a, Justin Herbert or even a Patrick Mahomes, who I
dude,
mean he's
Mahomes
had a
waited a
year,
year.
but it's like,
Yeah,
Joe Burrow was kind of like, average when he first started out and then he tore his ACL. But it wasn't until they got Chase and they really started building out that offense and everything that his fantasy stock really took off. So, I mean, yeah, it is. It just like also there is just value in having a veteran on your team, and you got a guy that what he's going to bring to the table, what he's capable of, and if you're looking to compete right now, I think that Tua is way more your best bet than Bryce Young, and then maybe you get Jaden Daniels, maybe you get Drake May dropping all the way to 5, or if you stayed up at 3. But yeah, I mean, I think
yeah.
getting these more proven assets and maybe to a lesser extent, but then two as well is just bigger for your team's overall vision.
I would love to know the last time a rookie quarterback finished in the top 12, a QB1 in fantasy,
Yeah.
besides Stroud. Like I can't think of one off the top of my head. Um,
Let me see if Kyler did. Let me
I
see.
don't know. Maybe Kyler. Like
Kyler's
I
QB
mean,
6, no big deal.
okay, yeah, there you go. But like that's what I'm saying. But like these guys
That's
just
first
don't.
overall pick, and that would
Yeah,
be
like
like that was a guy that people were legit tanking to get, and
yeah. I mean,
all
even
that
like
stuff.
Caleb Williams, like he had the generational label on him last year. Whatever. I don't think I'm not confident any three of these guys are gonna be a QB1.
And the thing is, even if it is Williams, I mean, that's a guy that's probably, in most drafts is probably going first overall. So it's like you wouldn't have even gotten him with those picks. So,
Exactly. Exactly.
and it's kind of something that we've talked about with the real draft with the Patriots is like, they're sitting at 3. Do we really want them taking the QB 3 on the board when there's the wide receiver 1 left? There's their choice of their top O lineman, anything like that. It's just one of those things. It's like, yeah, is grabbing that quarterback, that third quarterback off the board at that point, is that really going to help you win a fantasy championship in these next 2-3 years?
Probably not.
Who knows? So, um, yeah, I think that kind of covers. I don't think there's too much to it.
I
I
will
think that
say, like, I would like to see this league kind of come around on, like, I feel like this league puts so much pressure on value for value on trades, but like, an overpay is okay. An overpay is okay when you're making a move to compete in that season or like build your roster construction. Like, I needed that QB2. I wasn't going to get it in the draft. I needed to overpay to get, like, you can make an argument all three of these trades I did were overpays, but I'm okay with it because of my roster construction and like my competitive window. I don't think this league Yeah, I think this league is hesitant to make deals that are overpays because
Yeah,
they're
it's
on
a
value.
lot of times you're giving up future value to get current value. And I
Right.
think that that's where, there's the stagger in value between a 24 first and a 25 first, et cetera. And I think a lot of people, they want their feet in both buckets. Like they want to be making a trade that's both good for now and equally as good for later. And it's like, no,
Sounds
you're
like
going to
Big
have to
Brain.
compromise on one of those ends to accomplish what you're actually trying to do. So if you're looking to get young, then you're going to have to give up some current value, and your team's probably going to be shittier now. Or if you're looking to win now, then it's like you might fuck yourself in the future. But it doesn't have to be that extreme. But yeah, it's like there has to be a little bit of balance and trying to, figure out the weights and how you want to do it. But
Right.
um, all right. We were talking about how that last trade was, also making a move for this next deal that you wanted to put
Yep.
together. Everybody knows it. It's the slippery Pete, Carson Wentz, Big Brain LLC 3-team deal. Mr. Nasty got traded. Two 2025 firsts got traded. The first overall pick, David Njoku. Those are kind of the star names in this trade. Pete, let's talk about it. There was some chatter in the group chat. McMorrow, it looked like he blocked your number. I think he's, kind of blacklisting you from deals in the future. He was dragging your name through the mud. I will say you didn't fight back too much. I don't know if that's, you're kind of letting the guilt talk there, or if you feel like you're above the situation and it's above addressing or anything like that. But McMorrow was making some pretty damning accusations about you. Here's a chance to maybe clear your name, or just throw some dirt on his and say, well, what about him?
Yeah. First of all, I was an absolute dick to McMorrow, absolute asshole to McMorrow, and that was intentionally. Quick background of this trade: before the Tua deal was made, McMorrow and I have been talking about a 1-1 deal all throughout the offseason, in the NFL playoffs and everything. He gave me a price. He gave me He wanted McMorrow's 25 first, so his own 25 first, 25-1-1, and two 25 firsts for Njoku and 1-1, 24-1-1. So that price was locked in. It was Njoku, 25-1-1, two 25 firsts for 1-1 and Njoku. That was like locked in. We agreed to that. That he was ready to accept that trade. I just had to go get the stuff. So once Bowen accepted that trade to give me the 25 first, the Suns 25 first, and I already had obviously McMorrow's 25-1-1. So I had two out of the three pieces of the deal here. I just needed to go get one more 25 first. And I figured out like it's gonna be Watson. Like I had the deal with Tua. Okay, I got Tua. Okay, I got that second 25 first. Watson's gonna be the piece I move here. So I start shopping around. The only options here are Wallace, Big Brain, and McMorrow. I mean Wallace, Big Brain, and Amaral. They're the only ones with 25 first. McMurrow owns every other pick in the 25 first round. So Big Brain has two. So
And one quick correction, it
yeah,
was three. I said 225 first in the deal. It was three.
yeah,
McMorrow got three
correct,
2025 first.
correct. So I go to Wallace. He doesn't want any part of Watson whatsoever. No, not interested. Nothing. Not gonna
Rightfully
happen
so.
there. Yeah. So then
Man
I
of
go to
honor.
Amaral and Big Brain. I go to Amaral and Big Brain. I go to Amaral. I'm looking for two firsts. Don't get it. Looking for a first and 2 seconds. Don't get it. Quickly realized the price for this was going to be a first, 25 first, and a second for Watson, which I hate selling at that price. I think he's got higher upside than those two picks in terms of value. But I had to do what I had to do to get my guy at 1-1. So
Yeah.
the deal comes into play. I agree with it with Amaral first. I went to Amaral first because I just like don't working with Big Brain. I don't like working with Big Brain in general, to be honest. I think they're like the biggest cheapos and nickel and dimers in the league. But I go to Amaral first. He agrees to a deal. Okay, Amaral's in. We go to McMorrow. Amaral tells me he's 99% in on the deal. And that was Watson and Shakir for a first and a second, which is what the deal ended up being. And then we just can't get this thing accepted. We just can't get it accepted. Amaral decides to counter and add in a second on his side. So at that point, I was like, all right, Amaral, like you said you were 99% in. Now you're throwing in another second.
That
When
was
you
the 1%.
yeah. What's the 1%? Whatever. McMorrow texts me immediately. He's like, it's not on me to give him that extra second. I don't know where that's. And I was like, okay, like what's the quickest way to shut down Amaral trying to get another second? Let me just go to Big Brain and see if they're down for the price of Watson and Shakir for the first and the second. Big Brain down immediately. They're in. Okay, great. Now I've got two people who both agreed to the deal. All we got to do is get this accepted. I go to McMorrow. I send the offer and the thing. McMorrow sees that I'm getting an extra 25 second. A 25 second, I think it was Mikey's 25 second. He thought I was just going to get a 25 first for Watson. I ended up getting a 25 second as well. He decides at the 11th hour, after he's already decided that what the price is, that he wants that 25 second. I'm like, okay, I don't care. I'm overpaying for my guy. It's your 11th an hour, nickel and diming past your price. Whatever. I'm doing this to get my guy. Good. All right, fine. Take the thing. Then Watson, or it was just Watson to begin with. And then I ended up even adding Shakir on top of Big Brain Sign just to shut them up and give them an extra piece because they wanted one too. So I feel like I'm bending over backwards to make this deal happen. I'm texting everyone. McMorrow's sitting cushy, drinking his Mike's Hard Lemonades, like off on the ciders. Like he's texting me drunk pictures. He's shit faced. I'm just like, I was just getting sick of this guy. Like, so sick of him. 11th hour nickel and diming, not doing any work for this deal, no urgency to make it happen. I'm texting everyone. And then we finally get, like, I finally come to him with 2 offers accepted in the app, 2 out of 3. Deal with Amaral, the deal with Big. All he had to choose was which deal he wanted on the price that he asked for, plus the 25 second I added at the end. And then he's got the audacity to make it into a 6-teamer, adding 2 more teams to the deal.
That's a classic McMorrow move.
And I'm like, McMorrow, like what? And like the 2 pieces he adds to the deal have nothing to do with the deal whatsoever. Like those 2 pieces were not assets from my team, not assets from Big Brain, not assets from Amaral. It was completely separate. Why are you doing this? Like, can you just get this deal done? So I'm like, I'm getting pumped up now just talking about it. Like I'm getting hot. I'm bending over backwards to get this deal done. I met your price. I even then gave you more on top of the second and Shakir. And now you have the audacity to waste my time and effort. I get it. I get it. It's February. I get it. There's no rush. Whatever. I got pissed off. I got pissed. So I woke up. I chose violence, and I went at McMorrow's throat. I went at his throat. I blew him up personally. I blew him up in the message with Amaral. I blew him up in the message with Big Brain. I ripped him as much as I possibly could without like going out of bounds. Like I just started calling him the worst, pretty much, like just ripping him apart to try to hammer this deal home. Finally, he's like, I never want to talk to you again, and accepts the deal. I'm like, yes, fine. That's a win. That's a win. Like there's a difference between like you don't have to be nice in Dynasty. We're not here to make friends. We all are friends, but business is business, and Big Mario is bad business. Like he's to this day, he's still going to be bad business. I think everyone has got a taste of how McMorrow does business in this league. And that's why I'm not too concerned about my reputation around the trade market. Because I really do think that people will understand what I went through. And I had to be a dick to get this deal done. So I was an absolute asshole.
No, and I'll say, maybe he broke you a little bit, but
It did.
I will
Yeah,
say,
it
I mean,
broke me down.
I've been there before, and maybe I haven't gone full nuclear, bomb on him, but at the same time, like I have been there before where it's like, if you're not gonna do the deal, just tell me no.
Right, right. Just
Don't
tell me.
don't keep telling me because now you're making me look like an asshole, following up, seeing what you think. Oh, what about this? What about this? You're making me look and feel like an asshole because I'm coming here, but then at the end of the day, you're not interested. Now all of a sudden, like I'm a dick. So it's like, if you're not interested, just tell me. And I try to say to people, if my price is too high, but you're interested in this player, just tell me what you would like. Tell me what you would
Right,
offer. Like,
right.
so you like this player, but you wouldn't trade even a 2026 third for Anthony Richardson. It's like, if that's what you're willing to pay, tell me because I can just say no. But he's a guy that he likes to just kind of work in silence. And, you were talking about it, but it's his classic move. He likes to, you have a great deal right here. That's 2, maybe a third team. And then he comes back with something that's like a 6-team deal.
It's
And
like makes no
to me,
sense.
I think anything over 4, and I think even 4 can be pushing it at a bit, is a gimmick. It's a total gimmick of a trade. You don't need 5, 6 teams to get a deal.
It's not going to happen.
It's not going to happen. Okay. Like one, you're not going to get 5 teams to agree on something. And if you do, then it's like, oh, let's all exchange, 2027 third rounders or something.
Right.
And then also, it's like if you don't have the materials to get a deal done between like 3 teams, like what do you do? Like then you're probably not making a good trade. So yeah, I mean, I think like you said, I think a lot of people do understand your frustration. It was just McMorrow. He came out and he chose to kind of get out in front of the news and start dragging your name. But
And
I
I'm
think it's
like,
good to give
yeah,
you this platform where everybody's watching to let you clear your name.
I'm not saying that there's no blood on my hands. Like, Big Brain only came into this deal because I brought them in. It was originally with Amaral, and Amaral was 99% locked in. When Amaral countered with that second, it kind of pissed me off. To say 99% in and then just add a second. I've been nickel and dimed enough. I'm gonna go find another partner.
Yeah.
So I went to Big Brain. At the end of the day, like Amaral did get screwed because I think the difference was Amaral was offering Bowen's 25 first, and Big Brain was offering their own 25 first, which McMo chose Big Brain's first over Bowen's first. So at the end of the day, Amaral did get screwed. I apologize to Amaral for that. But again, that's just business. There's no real apology to give, in my opinion. Like the deal's a deal.
Yeah, yeah, it's the Michael Corleone. It's just business. That's all it is. It's all.
Yeah. And then, like, I don't know, the actual, I mean, we just talked about the schematics of the deal or whatever, but
Yeah, I was gonna say let's get into what people
the
actually
actual
got.
deal
So I mean,
itself, right?
one thing. Let's not knock McMar out of the way here. He's got 3 firsts in this deal. What does that
He
put?
ate. He
8.
ate. No,
He's
I'm
got
saying
8
what
first.
both.
TBD how those play
Both.
out. I
Yeah.
don't
I'm
know.
saying he ate in this deal, and
Oh, oh, oh.
he also has 8 out of 12
Oh,
picks.
okay. Well, that
Yeah,
doesn't
yeah.
work. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so he now has, a strong majority in the first round. A lot of buying power can come with that. We'll see what he does. I mean, something tells me he doesn't know a single fucking name of a 2025 prospect. I think that he just saw, well, let me get this draft here. I don't know if he's aware that a lot of people view it as, a weak class. But we'll see. I mean, I feel like every year people have been saying that where next year's class is going to be as good, and then the draft comes
Yeah.
along, and everybody's like almost killing each other to get into the first round. So we'll see how it plays out. I think that there's a lot to see just based on purely talent in the class, what he actually does with the picks, whether he actually uses them in the draft, if he trades them, what kind of moves he makes. So there's not really too much to say except it's just fucking crazy. It's 8 of the 12 picks in the first round. It's insane.
Yeah, I mean he crushed it. Like he literally traded 1-1 this year. He got 1-1 next year and 2 firsts on top of it.
Yeah.
So that's work. It's great
Yeah.
work.
So Big Brain, they make their move. They get Deshaun Watson. They
Which
go.
also shows how asinine is that I had to beg him to accept this trade. Sorry, I'm sorry. Sorry.
Big Brain, they get a quarterback. This feels like a move that they shouldn't have made, if I'm being honest.
I don't know.
Deshaun Watson, we talked about it, and we were both kind of in his corner fantasy wise.
Yeah.
This season where we were saying, he is still putting out those finishes, but I also said, because I ended up watching a lot of Browns games just because at the time I had Jerome Ford, I also had Elijah Moore, so just Sunday ticket, I would always have them on, and to me, he just wasn't actually playing well. I had said before where if he was just like league average on accuracy, I think Elijah Moore would have had a top 30 season. I mean, there were just too many times where, there was one game where he would have had like 120 yards on sideline catches, and Deshaun Watson was just missing.
Yeah.
So like that was an issue that I felt, we'll see if he can fix that. They did fire, I keep forgetting his fucking name, AVP, right? Our new offensive coordinator. They fired that whole offensive staff. It wasn't because they were doing poorly. I mean, they had Joe Flacco step in. They made it a run into the playoffs and everything. It was more that they're looking to bring in an actual offensive staff that is tailored around Deshaun Watson's game. So they're doing everything they can to make this work. That doesn't mean that it will work, but we'll see. At the very least, he can be like a Justin Fields where it's like, well, like if you watch him, he sucks, but I mean, he's still putting up top 10 fantasy finishes and all that stuff. So we'll see how it plays out for Big Brain. I think that they kind of should be going more towards a full just tear down and just get ahead of it and just, start investing in some youth and moving on from everything that they have. But I think they want to keep trying to run it back. So, that's their decision. It's not my team. You made the big move. I mean, you got Njoku, who I think will be very helpful for your starting lineup now, but this is a move for you to get 1-1. It sounds like you're going Marvin. Do you want to talk? Are you willing to lock yourself into Marvin Harrison? Or is there a possibility that you fall in love with a Caleb Williams and you make the pick there? Or, I mean, who knows? Maybe you just trade out of that spot. But how are you feeling? Are you ready to lock into Marvin there?
This is growth here. This is growth. I learned from last year. So obviously I had the 1-1 and 1-2 and 1-3 last year or something like that. I was preaching Bryce Young for 2 years before I drafted him. And I don't think I ever admitted it. I think you called me out for it on one episode, but I mentally locked myself into Bryce Young so much so.
Yeah, you couldn't do it.
If I didn't take him and he did great, I would literally kill him. Like I would be a mess. So like I'm never gonna make that mistake again of locking myself into. Hopefully, I'm never have 1-1 again. But I'm never gonna make that mistake again to locking myself into a person. But I mean, if you just look at these 3 trades I made, I traded for 2 quarterbacks in the 1-1, right? Like I traded for Anthony Richardson. I traded for Tua Tagovailoa. I have my two quarterbacks. If the draft's today, yes, I'm taking Marv, no doubt about it. But I'm not locking myself in. Like, I have no depth on this roster. Let's say someone comes from 1-3, 1-4 and says, "Hey, Alex, like, hey, Pete, you wanna maybe take a chance at Malik Neighbors at 1-4, and then I'll give you this instead to cover the gap." That's something I would entertain. That's something I would entertain. Tua Tagovailoa is supposed to get an extension this offseason. It's supposed to happen like pretty soon, I think. If that deal falls through and he doesn't get extended, something crazy happens, then yeah, I'd probably have to take a quarterback. But at this point in time, I'll say 99% on Marv, but there's that 1%, like we learned. So, yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what also helps is that you're in a position where you don't have to make a pick either way. You do have your starting lineup here, and I think that maybe you'd be better suited, probably just based off your overall depth, maybe going wide receiver, just because that would knock a Pittman or a Puka back to the starting lineup. Or I mean, you could also just give Marv time to develop. Who knows how
Right.
quickly he gets acclimated to everything? I mean, even some of these guys that are top of the league now, it still took them a little bit of time. Maybe they weren't necessarily the same prospect as him, but that's something we'll talk about when Amaral gets on. But at the same time, it's like, who knows? I mean, if you really like Caleb Williams, it's like, having Tua as your QB3 also isn't so bad either. I mean, you have Anthony Richardson, who does have, we got to call it like it is, right? He has an injury concern right now. He,
Right.
played 4 games. I think he left 2 of them early. So there is a little bit of fear there. So if you weren't ready to do that, that was kind of my approach with Ant too, was like, well, maybe I will hold on to him, because if he does get hurt, I do have Levis, who I also like. And, having 3 instead of, being down to 2 maybe is better for me. So I think that there's arguments for both sides of it. And you're in a position where, I think either one would be a good choice for your team. And I don't think that you'd be handcuffing yourself either way.
Yeah, I mean, if I take Marv, I got CD, Garrett Wilson, Michael Pittman, Puka Nakua, Marvin Harrison Jr. That is just an elite young wide receiver core. I only have 2 running backs in Bijan and JT, but a move farther down the line on my mind is like I could move a Pittman for a win now running back. Like, let's say Big Brain doesn't make the playoffs, they want to get a little younger. I move either Pittman or Puka for like a CMC and try to make a playoff run. So I feel good about having those 5 elite wide receivers, and then the ability to trade one of them for a running back down the line this season. I also would say like I'm a 2 QB believer, but we've seen it what happens in this league. I think 2 Pins is the best example. They absolutely dominated for 2 years with Mahomes and Herbert, but as soon as Herbert went down this year, I mean, they had some other problems, but they only had Patrick Mahomes, and they kind of tanked after that, right? Like, I think they had a lot of
You,
other
you don't want to be
issues.
starting, yeah, you don't want to be starting Taysom Hill as your second quarterback on a
Exactly,
bye
right?
week or
Yeah.
anything like that.
So like I don't really buy into the 3 QB mentality. But I think I'd be more likely to trade like Jerry Judy in a second for like a Stafford, or maybe like go get like a Kirk Cousins for like something cheaper, like maybe tear down at running
Yeah.
back and
I,
get like
I I
Kirk
was looking at it
Cousins.
more from like an upside standpoint, where it's like you
Right.
kind of know what Tua is, and like he's not a league winner. Like
No,
he's a floor guy. He's a guy that's
exactly.
going to give you 15, 16 points at least every week. And he's still going to pop off because he has that offense and he has those weapons. But if you felt like Caleb Williams, in whatever situation he ends up in, is going to be, the next
Top 10.
Mahomes, or he's
Yeah.
gonna, I like comparing him to Kyler, calling him a taller Kyler, everything like that. But if you feel like he's gonna step in and be a top 10 quarterback, then it's like, well, shit. I mean, if you could have Ant doing that and have Caleb Williams doing that, and then on your bye weeks, or if one of them gets hurt, then it's like, oh shit. Well, now I have to start Tua. That's not the worst.
It's not
It's
the
something to
worst.
consider. It comes down to how you view those quarterbacks. So that's really all
Yeah.
it is.
And the last thing I'll say on Big Brain is like they did need to make a move for a quarterback. Jordan Love put up a season I had not seen coming absolutely at all, QB5. But the rest of their roster, Gardner Minshew, Ryan Tannehill, Jimmy G, and Kenny Pickett. So Kenny Pickett, I guess, is their QB2. I mean, that's a dumpster fire of a QB2 situation. So they did need to make a move. I will say they are absolutely over the moon about getting Watson and Shakir for a 25 first and second. They are like, they think they clear and away ran that trade, absolutely stealed it. And they feel good about Watson going forward. Even though I think he's a disgusting human being and should be locked up and jailed out of this league, that Big Brain's feeling real good about themselves right now.
Hey, Dove is saying that there could be more suspension coming. So,
Yeah, Dov was saying.
yeah, so I mean, it's something to think about, and I mean, yeah, I mean, good for them. They got Khalil Shakir. I personally, I was a guy. I think I drafted Khalil Shakir.
You did with
I
the
think
last pick in the draft.
So
312.
I saw something in him, but I always knew, if I had to create some roster space, I was going to have to cut him because it's one of those guys where, yeah, I mean, he's going to have some good weeks and he's a good player. I don't really see the fantasy relevance coming, but I mean,
No,
good for him. Good for them, I should say. So,
he's a
uh,
roster.
all right, that wraps it up. That is our first installment of our first episode. We'll see. We'll see. Maybe I'll just do its own standalone episode and try and get that out tomorrow morning or something. And then we'll also have Tyler Amaral on to start our draft season and talking about all that. That is the Lex and Pete show. We will talk to you TBD. All right. All right, it is the Lex and Pete show. We are back. We have Tyler Amaral joining us. He is our draft correspondent. I'm calling this the rookie ranking 0.0. It's kind of a dead spot in the football world. We're between the Super Bowl. At the time of this filming, we're about 2 weeks away from the combine. So there's really not too much to talk about. It's a lot of just what we saw from the college season. We just want to kind of get our takes out there, maybe plant our flag in some guys, other guys. I think there's a lot that's subject to change with these rankings as we start to see more throughout the draft process. But Pete, this is a continuation of our episode from earlier. This will all be together. Amaral, it's great to have you back. How are you feeling? How are you feeling heading into this draft season? You have the fourth overall pick. What do you have? The eighth and the 11th as well. You got a bunch of other picks that you can play with too. How are you feeling entering draft season?
I'm feeling a little bit better than that initial first night when we had the lottery. I was pretty pissed falling outside the top three, but I'm growing to like four, and I think this draft is deep enough where I'm comfortable at 8 and 11 as of right now as well.
Yeah, I feel the same way, and I think that that's kind of something that we've started to pick up on as a league. I think an example that a lot of people point towards would be Pete making that trade for Jonathan Taylor, Kyle Pitts so early in the offseason, trading a bunch of those first. And then when the draft came around, he was kind of like, shit, I kind of wish I had those picks, whether just to pick the players that were going in those spots or just for what the draft value or the trade value kind of becomes with those picks as well. So I think that the play with especially higher draft picks is to hold on because it's just going to get crazier and crazier as somebody has an insane combine or pro day or somebody just jumps up in the draft and all of a sudden people want to go nuts and they'll do whatever to get that pick. Pete, how are you feeling? I mean, you traded out of what all both of your first rounders, right? So how are you feeling heading
Yeah,
into this
I traded
draft,
out a,
making
I
these
traded out a,
rankings?
I traded out a 1-3-1-5. Both of them. I felt like, I mean, we kind of covered it in the beginning. I mean, are we doing? Is this going to be a combined episode, KB? Our trade episode is going to be
Yeah, I
with
think I'm just gonna put them all together.
Yeah, so I already talked about how I felt about that trade, but I think trading the 1-3 for um what did I trade the
Anthony
1-3 for? AR,
Richardson.
yeah, for AR and then 1-5 for Tua. That was kind of the move to get two quarterbacks to compete this year. I talked about that in the trade. So I don't really feel too bad about getting out of those picks because I did it for two top 10 quarterbacks, like I said earlier. And I kind of had a feeling I'd get the 1-1 deal done. So feels good to be at the top again, 2 years in a row.
Yeah. I mean, I think I asked you earlier, but did you trade out of those like, are you still high on some of these picks or is it more of like a sign of how you feel about the class? Or like when you're filling out these rankings, were there guys that you really do love?
Yeah, there were for sure. I think there's a steep drop off after like seven. I feel really good about the top seven. The wide receivers past seven, I think is like a total toss up. As of right now, it's still super early. There were guys that I definitely loved, but getting two quarterbacks to compete this year was, the focus.
All right. I say we just hop into it. So we're just going to go position by position. We're going to do quarterback, running back, receiver. And then we were talking about with receiver, we're going to mix in a little bit of tight end talk. Brock Bowers, of course. And then, maybe some other names that we want to throw out there, but those will probably be later round dart throws, I feel like. So I'll pull up the rankings now. Here we have the quarterback rankings. So we got Lex Lumpkin, we got Slippery Pete, we got Amaral here. I don't know. Where do we want to start? I mean, Pete, you have the lowest of the bunch. As I think we were talking beforehand, that's more of just you want to only put out guys that you really feel like you have a true opinion on, right?
Yeah. I didn't
So
want to
how
go.
are you
Yeah.
feeling? So I think one that we want to talk about right now, because I'm just looking at it. You guys have Penix 5 and 6. I have him 8. He's the last one that I have ranked. Emerald, how are you feeling about Michael Penix?
I think a lot of it's going to come down to scheme. I'm not really a fan of Penix or Nix, really. Like as you can see, like I have Michael Pratt higher than both of those guys, which I don't think many people do. But I think like a lot of it's going to come down to scheme for both Penix and Nix, and they both have just played in such quarterback-friendly schemes the last couple of years. They're older, obviously. They have a lot of experience. They've seen everything. And then there's also the injury concern with Penix as well, and he's already not that great of an athlete to begin with. So if he gets, injured, another knee injury that could, sap any, remaining athleticism he may have. So I'm just really not the biggest Michael Penix fan, and I kind of have always had Penix and Nix lumped together.
Yeah, so with me, the injuries I think is kind of the biggest factor. It's the age. It's the fact that it's like, he was never like I just never felt like he was like that dominant. It was something that I've talked about in kind of mid-season episodes and stuff where Jaden Daniels, Bo Nix, and Michael Penix are three guys that kind of had later breakouts, and they, obviously had their Heisman campaigns this year. But with a guy like Jaden Daniels, it felt more like somebody that was actually just growing into their adult body. He was just more of a late bloomer physically, and once he actually grew into that, he took that step up and he started playing and he put up a season that he put up. Where Bo Nix and Michael Penix, it felt more to me like they were just older guys playing against younger competition. And I think that they, should, definitely flash different strengths. And I think that there are pathways to them having success in the NFL. But with Penix, I just watch him and he's just a goofy lefty. I do worry about what he had, like 4 season-ending injuries, something like that. So I just, to me, it's more of just a sign that like I'm just all set. I think that in the right system, he can be a good system quarterback, get the ball where it needs to be and deliver. But I don't think that there's really much fantasy upside there. For me, the QB8 ranking was more of just me saying I'm really I'm all good unless he's like a third round pick in our rookie drafts. Pete, how are you feeling about Penix?
Yeah, I'll say right off the bat, I didn't think Penix was a guy that's going to come in and start his rookie year. I think he's a guy that either waits behind someone for 1 year, or is just like a backup quarterback. I didn't think he played well in the national championship game. Under pressure, he looked horrible. If he didn't get to his first read, I thought he looked horrible. And once the play broke down, I didn't see really anything out of him. So I didn't think Penix was a first, like I don't think he's a first round quarterback. He's not going to start when he comes into the league right away. I think the top 4 is like where that threshold is of like those 4 are ready to start. I didn't think Penix was. So I kind of threw him the best of the worst, I guess.
Yeah, and you guys
I
are.
think with
What's that?
no, just saying. I think like Penix, like I think if somebody like Bruce Arians was still in the league, that would be the perfect fit for him. Like he's a legitimately like great deep ball thrower. But other than that, like you mentioned, Pete, like when he gets sped up and he comes off that first read, he's really not good.
Yeah, to me, it's just like I think that in the perfect situation, he's like a good floor QB2, weekly QB2 type guy where it's just like, for what he's probably going to be going for in a lot of rookie drafts, I'm just not interested at all. You guys are higher on Penix than I am, and I'm higher on Nix than you guys are. I'm kind of interested in that as well because with Nix, I feel like, as I was talking about those 3 older quarterbacks with Penix, Nix, and Daniels, I do kind of have them tiered separately, almost just top tier, second and third. With Nix, I think it was Daniel Jeremiah, it was somebody on NFL.com, but they kind of just threw out like a comparison to Jalen Hurts, and yeah, I think it's easy to kind of laugh at that just because we know what Jalen Hurts is now, right? He's the MVP. I think for like 10 minutes, he was the highest paid player ever. Then Lamar got his deal, all that stuff. But like, you have to remember also what he was. He was a guy that got benched in the national championship. He got ran out of town by Tua. And then he kind of found himself in Oklahoma and he really broke out in that with getting that second win. And, he was a Heisman campaign guy as well. And then he was a second round pick and he was backing up Carson Wentz. And then, of course, Wentz fell apart and then he came in. But I think you have to think about that journey that he took. And like, that's something that Bo Nix could kind of replicate here. And I'm not saying that that's what he's going to become. I think that that's a possible outcome for him. And because of that, that's why I had him ranked fifth. I think that it's, kind of after that four, that's something that me and Pete were talking about before the show, where all four of us have the same guys in the top four. After that, it's kind of just take your pick. How are you feeling? Feel it out like that. But I do think, like you were saying, Amaral, in the right system, I think Nix can actually be really, really effective. But I do think it's going to matter where he goes. If he goes to some dog shit team that's not going to develop a quarterback, I think he's going to drop in my rankings. But Pete, how are you feeling about Nix?
Yeah, I honestly didn't watch a ton of Knicks. I didn't look into him that much. Again, I kind of just said he was the worst of the worst in that top 8 I've got there, or top 7 I've got there. I wonder how much like Troy Franklin was a factor in Bo Nix's success. Like, was it Bo Nix or was it Troy Franklin? I think it's because we have such elite wide receivers. That's a question you can ask a lot about these quarterbacks. But I don't really have a ton to say on Knicks. I just the worst of that bottom tier is what I had him.
Yeah, and Amaral, you were kind of touching on him as well, but you got any other thoughts? You also have him as your QB7 with Pete.
Yeah, I think just basically saying, echoing what I was saying before, like I just think a lot of it comes down to him being an experienced player in a really quarterback friendly system. I do think he's better than I thought because I thought it was all Kenny Dillingham and then Dillingham left, went to Arizona State and he still put up numbers. But even with that said, that's a very quarterback friendly system, good offensive line at Oregon. And I think like this year, 2024 season, I think we'll see Dylan Gabriel have like similar or better production as Bo Nix has had the last couple of years.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like you said, like Nix and Penix too. Those are two guys that, from everything I read, were like pretty disappointing at the Senior Bowl as well. So I mean, who knows? Like, could have just been a bad week. Whatever. But it is definitely something to keep an eye on. Amaral, I'm interested to hear about these two guys that you have because these are guys that when I was pulling up just rookie rankings just to have a general list and to make sure I wasn't missing any names. Those are two guys I saw and I was like, maybe I'll dig into it, but like, I can't pretend like I know anything about them. Michael Pratt, Austin Reed. Can you try and talk us into those, especially Michael Pratt, who was your QB5?
Yeah, I mean, I honestly think there's more upside, like athletically with Pratt than Penix. So that kind of factors in. I'm not really expecting much from anybody outside the top four, but I think there's just more upside with Pratt than some of these other guys, Penix, Nix, Rattler, Milton. And then Austin Reed, I just kind of threw in there because I honestly didn't want to stop the list at 9. It was like a weird fucking number. So I wanted to just throw Austin Reed in there because I thought he was the 10th best quarterback. He came from that Western Kentucky system, like Bailey Zappi, like every quarterback puts up stupid numbers in that system. So I don't think he really has much of a chance of producing in the NFL, but he was just my 10th guy. But Pratt, I do think there's a legitimate chance that Pratt could be like a lower end starter. Like I think his ceiling would be like the 26th best starter, 26 to 32, 26 to 32nd best starter in the NFL. So I don't think there's much upside there. But from what I saw at Tulane, like I have Tajay on my team. Like I'm a big Tajay Spears guy. And last year, like when Tulane won the Cotton Bowl, they beat Caleb Williams in USC. He was awesome in that game. He just got like intangibles wise. I just think really like he has a decent chance of carving out a long NFL career. Again, you were probably looking at somebody that might be used as a quarterback too in some weeks, but I just think he's better than some of those other guys I have there.
Man, I see you're low on Rattler. I was a little surprised. I mean, I had initially had him higher when I started making these rankings, but then I realized that I was maybe overreacting a little bit to the Senior Bowl stuff. What has you so low on him, even though he's starting to gain a little bit of steam coming off of that?
Yeah, I mean, I honestly like part of it might be like the mess that was around him at South Carolina. Like he had a dreadful offensive line, so like that might be factoring into it a little bit too much for me. But like even go back to Oklahoma, I've just really never been a Rattler guy. Like he, just the way he kind of carried himself at the beginning. It seems like he's gotten better with that. Like I thought he was an asshole at first, but it doesn't seem like he's as much of an asshole now as he was when he was at Oklahoma. And he did have a great Senior Bowl week. He's probably the best quarterback there. I mean, Penix and Knicks were terrible by all accounts. So, I mean, I don't really trust Rattler. Um, I mean, again, like outside the top four, I think it's all dart throws, and I don't even really like love McCarthy either. Um, but I've just never been a Rattler guy, and that so my initial thoughts on him, plus having that shit offensive line and him really not having the greatest year at South Carolina, that's kind of all factoring in there.
Yeah, I think it's one of those wait and see things too, where it's like how much love does he actually get in the draft? Coming off of like, this type of positive news. But yeah, I mean, I think a guy like him, the more I kind of sit on it and think about it, it feels like he's going to be, a day two guy. Maybe step in and have somewhat of like a Desmond Ritter type opportunity there. But yeah, it is. You also have to think. I mean, I think he did play very well at South Carolina, or at least he put up really good numbers at South Carolina this year. He had like a lot of big games, but at the same time, it's like you can't forget his past, and you can't forget, he was. I mean, one, he was like a hyped up prospect that just disappointed at Oklahoma, and then he got benched for, who is going to be, likely the number one pick in this draft. So yeah, you have to be a little more grounded with the take, and you don't want to ride that hype train too hard. But yeah, we're kind of getting at it with talking about this top four. So I think we should just talk about these top guys now. So we all have JJ McCarthy at 4. Um, I don't think that that's as much of a comment on him as it is just kind of the rest of this class. I feel like it's those top 3. Then there's JJ McCarthy because of his age, because of the traits that people are talking about, everything like that. And then, like we said, it's just kind of take your pick with these other guys. But Pete, what are your thoughts on McCarthy, especially coming off that national championship and starting to get this love? And we were talking about it before the show, but he's getting a lot of this hype when football isn't being played. So it is something to consider. But Pete, how are you feeling about it?
Yeah, I mean, getting a lot of hype is an understatement. This is like JJ McCarthy week. I feel like 2 weeks ago was like the warning shot. We heard Harbaugh say he was like the top quarterback in this draft or something. And then like the last 2 weeks has just been JJ McCarthy getting gassed up to the moon. For me, he just hasn't shown me it. Like the story behind him is that they had an unreal offensive line, and the run game in Michigan just carried him to one of the elite college football seasons that Michigan had. But I'm looking at his stats right now, and the teams that he played that were good. He just like didn't do a lot. 150 yards against Ohio State. He had 220 against Alabama in the national or the playoff, 150 against Washington in the championship, and then 60 yards against Penn State. And they blew out every other team in the Big Ten. So like I have McCarthy there because he's I think the 4th best quarterback, but I think there's a very big gap between the top 3. Not a very big gap, but a gap between the top 3 and JJ McCarthy. And I didn't ever consider him in the top 4. I think he's or in the top 3, I mean. And I also think like he is sneaky athletic. He kind of reminded me, like I think with quarterbacks, we talk a lot about rushing upside, which we're probably going to get to when we talked about Jaden and Caleb. But JJ kind of reminded me of like Daniel Jones, kind of guy who'd get like 20, 30 yards a game on scramble. He's like sneaky fast, sneaky athletic. So I can see him that like a little bit of a rushing upside, I guess. But I just haven't seen him do it, put up the numbers. So I'm not going to put him in my top 3 based off like just hype and traits alone, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, my early read on him was just I look at his face and he has that Drew Lock, Zach Wilson kind of punchable frat boy, Tabor Academy type face, that type of thing. But he doesn't play like them. Like they were just kind of like freelancers running around making plays, all that type of stuff. Something that I do like about him is that I think that he is capable of just playing NFL quarterback.
Yeah.
He can deliver the ball where it needs to be. He can do it on time. So I think that he has, like a lot of people are starting to say, he has those traits that you're looking for. Who knows what that can turn into? I mean, we've seen, sometimes it just gives you like a floor, like say Aiden O'Connell, where it's like, okay, you're going to put up 230 yards and a touchdown every game. And, fantasy wise, it's just not going to do shit. Or there's, the Joe Burrows and the Tom Brady's of the world where they can just throw for 300 yards and a couple, 2, 3 touchdowns every week. And, they can just supply all the points that way. So it'll be interesting to see that. It does sound like he's going to be going in the first round. And I think that if he's, a back end of the first round rookie draft pick, I think that that is some solid value for a team that's looking at quarterback. But Amaral, what's your read on him?
Yeah, I mean, like that. So you mentioned that Penn State game. Like, not only did he have like under 100 yards, like what Michigan, that was a tightly contested game, like Michigan's closest game at that point, and they've ran the ball like 30 straight times, like no exaggeration. So I know he was dealing with something that game too, like injury wise, but still,
And I think that that's kind of the general belief is that he was playing at least like the second half of the season. He was pretty injured, so like that there could be something to that.
And so like, and then in the Rose Bowl, like I thought Michigan was done. I thought they were toast when they were trailing in the fourth quarter to Alabama, and then he led them on that, go ahead drive. So I think that, or the game tying drive to get it to overtime. But so that showed me a lot, and I think he has a chance to be a decent player. Like I don't think there's any system he could fall to that would have him enter my top three. Like I just don't think that would happen at all. But I've seen a lot of love. Like a team that comes up a lot is Denver at number 12 for JJ McCarthy. But like if he goes to like Minnesota and they move on from Cousins, or even if they keep Cousins for like a year and he has a year to develop, and then he inherits Jefferson and Addison, like that, you couldn't really ask for a better landing spot. So that's obviously going to factor into it as well. But just him as a player, he doesn't have anywhere near the upside of the top three.
Yeah, and that's all I think it comes down to. I think that, like I said, if you're getting him in the back half of the first round in our rookie draft, I think that you're getting pretty good value there, and that can give you a solid quarterback. But exactly the upside compared to these top three guys, which we can get into now, it just isn't the same. So I think it is a pretty steep drop off from there. But personally, for me, I have Caleb Williams as my QB3, and that's going to look very, very, very hot takey. I think that they're all pretty much the same to me. Like I'd be happy with getting any of them, at any point in that top three. Um, to me, I think I'm just looking at it from a fantasy standpoint, and I think that if you're looking at the way that Jaden Daniels plays, I think that he has the highest upside just because of what he brings as a rusher compared to the other two. Caleb Williams obviously can get out of the pocket and he can move, but Jaden Daniels is way more of a just get the ball, tuck it, and run type guy. I was watching him a bunch, and to me, it almost feels like this is like a kind of like out of left field comparison, but it feels like if like Lamar Jackson played like Colin Kaepernick, where it's just like this like big kind of wiry quarterback just taking off and running with the ball. And I think that if he can learn to run a little bit more like Lamar and just go at maybe 80% speed and slide and avoid those hits, I think that could go a long way for him, because I think that's the biggest concern is the hits that he seems to be willing to take. Where I mean, he has like a highlight reel of him just getting absolutely crunched running up the middle all the time. So to me, I just put him at that highest because of that fantasy upside. And it was something Pete and I were talking about pre-show where, Justin Fields is like a dog shit pro quarterback, but he's still putting up all these top 5 weeks when he's playing. So, to me, it's just something to consider. So I like that rushing upside, but obviously you guys have Caleb Williams there. Amaral, we'll start with you just because I was talking about Jaden Daniels. He's your QB3. How did you sort out this top three?
I mean, it was difficult. Like I just go back to Caleb. Like he's been the presumptive number one pick for going on 3 years now, and I think a lot of a lot of the shit that's come out this year, I just feel like it's when somebody's considered that top guy for this long, people just dig and dig and dig and try to find flaws, try to find faults in their game. He's definitely not a perfect player. Like I don't think he's quite the generational talent he was made out to be. So I think I agree he's probably overhyped, but just his ability to like create, off structure plays and he ability to pick up yards with his legs. I think I think he's going to be a difference maker. I think he's going to be a good NFL quarterback. I don't know if he'll be a great NFL quarterback, but I just think his arm talent plus his rushing upside is still higher upside than anyone, including May and Daniels in this class. The thing about Daniels that scares me a little bit is like even if he's a bad quarterback, like you were saying about Fields, right? Like he might put up top 10 weeks consistently, but what if he only does it for 3 years? Like,
Job security.
so yeah. So I mean, I would love him in redraft. I'd probably take more shots at Jaden Daniels in redraft. Um, but that rushing upside is hard to argue against, right? Like he's gonna put up his fair share of top 5, top 10 weeks.
Yeah, and I think the big thing that sold me on Jaden Daniels, it's something I'm going to have to dig up to actually find it. It was a tweet for sure, but it was just a comparison of the season that he put up statistically in his Heisman year last season, compared to other guys that reached certain thresholds that he did. It's just really good company. Like he didn't just put up a really good season in a year where other guys weren't that great. Like he put up one of the better college quarterback seasons ever. So even though there is the age concern, and like I said, with the play style, there was some injury concern there. I do think that it's going to translate a little bit better than I think, some players in other circumstances. So that's another reason why I feel a little bit more confident in ranking him that high. And I think that, come draft time, I do think that he's going to be, way more in this discussion than, you're taken more seriously in this discussion. But Pete, what's your read on this top three? How'd you sort them out?
Yeah, I was back and forth between Jaden Daniels and Caleb Williams at the top. I was famous last year, obviously, for taking Bryce Young over Anthony Richardson. I learned my lesson with passing on this rushing upside. KB, you already went over the Jaden Daniels rushing upside, but just to put some stats on it, 1,000 yards rushing and 10 TDs last year, 900 yards and 10 TDs in 2022, and then even 700 yards rushing. This is all rushing yards and 6 TDs in 2021 at ASU. Not to mention a bunch of just stupid numbers. You mentioned Lamar Jackson too. I also that's like the easy comp, I feel like, just because of the stupid numbers you put up. And he did it in the SEC when Lamar Jackson did it in the ACC, right? Louisville's in the ACC. Yeah.
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 He did it in the SEC. So I'm just I'm not gonna say no to those numbers again. I put him at 2. I had him up and down with Kenny Williams at 1 and 2. I think Caleb Williams is a better NFL quarterback, but I loved how you had Jaden Daniels at number 1. I think it's a great shot. And something I hear a lot is he gets compared to Lamar Jackson, and then in the same breath they'll say, but he does have passing concerns. I don't know if his passing game is going to translate to the NFL. It's exactly what they said about Lamar Jackson when he was a prospect. So I just don't. I'm almost scared to miss on this guy because of the stupid numbers he put up. I don't want to look over it. But I'm still putting Caleb Williams at number 1. He's going to get the first overall draft capital, like Amaral said. And I think Amaral also said when the play breaks down, he is so elite. He figures out a way to get the ball out of his hands. He scrambles, he makes time, he gets the receivers open, and he completes passes and moves the chains. I think he's he gets that Mahomes comp for it. I wouldn't comp him to Mahomes specifically. But I do think that there wasn't anything I saw in Caleb Williams' game that I could get off of him from number 1. It was more do I want Jaden Daniels as the rushing upside to overtake Caleb rather than finding something in Caleb where I'd put him below Jaden Daniels.
Yeah, and with Daniels too, it wasn't just coming out of nowhere. He did it last year as well. So that's what I like about him too. It's not really just a true late breakout. He didn't just be a 5th-year guy and suddenly start playing well. I mean, LSU went on a good run at the end of the 2 seasons ago at this point. So that's what I like about him too. And then yeah, Caleb Williams, I think that it's a little bit of prospect fatigue mixed with just being a little bit overrated, simply put, when people were comparing him to Mahomes. And like I said, to me, he was way more of a tall Kyler. And, for some reason, everybody hates Kyler. But yeah, I mean, I think that's way more of his comp. So I think that he can still be a good NFL quarterback, like you were saying, Amaral, but I don't know if he's going to breach that great tier of the way that he plays. We just talked through the whole top 3, and we didn't really mention Drake May at all, though. To me, he's my real life QB1. I feel like he's the guy that translates the best. I think a lot of people like to make the Josh Allen comp. I think there's a Herbert comp out there as well. And I think that that's way more accurate to me. I think the way that he plays, but I think that he's a guy that can just stand in the pocket, deliver the ball. He's got really good ball placement. He's got, just an unbelievable arm, and he can, get it done on the ground, and he can make those plays as well. Talking about when the play breaks down and doing all that stuff, he has that crazy highlight of, fumbling with the ball, then throwing it left-handed, getting the touchdown, everything like that. So to me, Drake May is the best quarterback in real life. And if I'm, making that pick in the actual NFL draft, he's probably who I'm looking at. But of course, I had to go with Daniels because of that rushing upside. But I mean, Pete, what's your read on Drake May?
I had him as quote unquote the best pure thrower in the draft. I thought that's kind of the tagline they put on CJ Stroud last year. But throwing the football, he looks like he can make every single throw in the book, whether it's a deep flag towards the sideline on the other side of the hash, off platform, touch passes, deep balls. I think he's the best pure thrower in the draft, but it was because of the rushing upside of Caleb and Jaden that I had to put those 2 ahead of him. Now that I'm looking at it, I kind of think that Jaden's the best rusher, Drake's the best thrower, but Caleb Williams is the best combination of both those.
Yeah, and I mean, Caleb Williams, he showed a willingness to run into run into the end zone from the goal line, all that stuff as well. He had a lot of rushing touchdowns from close by too. So I mean, if he's able to score and kind of vulture those touchdowns as well, then that gives him a ton of fantasy value as well. Amber, how do you feel about Drake May? He's your QB too, so
Yeah, I'm a fan of Drake May, and I think that Justin Herbert is probably the more accurate comparison rather than Josh Allen. I think I think he can definitely use his legs, but I think he's gonna use his legs more like Herbert or Mahomes, where he might get 20 or 30. He's gonna use his legs if the play breaks down. He could get you for 61 week, but like he's not gonna put up 90 or 100-yard rushing games like Josh Allen. But yeah, he's definitely the best pure thrower, I would say. I could go back and forth on Daniels and May depending on landing spot as well. But I think May. I think I mean, I know he's safer than Daniels, at least in my opinion. He's a safer play than Daniels. He honestly might be safer than Caleb Williams too. Like I think that the bust rate of a guy like Drake May is just pretty low. Again, like I kind of learned my lesson with Herbert too, where like a guy was slated to be this top pick or whatever, top 1 or 2 pick, which Herbert and May both were, and then they kind of underwhelmed in their final season in college due to things that were kind of out of their control, like shit offensive lines and bad weapons. Like Drake May, his best player on offense was Devontae Walker, and he was in and out of the lineup. And like we saw Senior Bowl week, that Devontae Walker is really not even that good. He's like a day 3 player probably. So I think a lot of the flaws May showed this past year, I think, were really things that were out of his control.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. And then that's exactly kind of why I like that Herbert comp. And Herbert was a guy that I really liked because yeah, people seem to be down on him going into it. And then I watched him, I believe it was the Rose Bowl, where he just went absolutely nuts. And I was like, how could anybody possibly bet against this guy? Like he just always gets it done. He always makes the play. So that's why I like him there. So all right, let's move over to the running backs now. Pete, we'll start with you just because you can't, you only had 5 guys, and that was because you just wanted to stay true to what you know and you didn't want to make shit up. So you want to just take us through your top 5 and then we can kind of work off of that.
Yeah, started with Trey Benson. I think he's the best complete back, like 3 down back. I mean, I guess first we'll just say like it's the overarching theme of this class is like it's a weak running back class. There's not a lot of guys in here who are going to take over a backfield week 1. But I thought Trey Benson was like the most well-rounded back, 3 down back in this draft. His feet do not stop. I watched 2 games that he played last year. He runs through contact like crazy, and his feet do not stop. He just keeps pumping and keeps going. And I love that. I love that out of him. I also had on here like solid speed, vision, contact balance. Out of all the running backs I watched, this was the guy that stood out the most that could handle like a 15 to 20 carry workload. He did tear his knee in 2020 and sucked at Oregon the next year when he was trying to recover. But when he transferred to FSU, he really shined last year. So I had him as the top. And then 2, I have Braylon Allen. I love Braylon Allen. I'm taking a real shot on him. I don't think he's at 2 on like any other list out there. But this dude's an absolute monster. 6'2", 240 pounds, only 20 years old. He broke out of Wisconsin when he was 18. I think he had 1,200 yards rushing his first 2 years when he was 18 and 19 at Wisconsin.
I think he would have been 17 as a freshman. He was like super fucking young.
Yeah, because he's only 19 now, right?
Yeah, putting up 12,000 or 1,200 yards at Wisconsin, which is like a well-known running back factory. So like, I was just like, I'm going to take a shot on this guy. Like the physical profile, the speed to the second level. I don't like. I've seen a lot of Brandon Jacobs comps, but like, I think if he gets a workload and starts getting like 2 or in between the tackles on first, second down, not just like a red zone touchdown threat, he could really become like a Derrick Henry type ceiling, which is kind of crazy to say, but the physical profile looks like it. I guess the highlight of my running back room or my running back rankings here is Jonathan Brooks at 3. Amaral, I saw you have him at 3 too, but I think he's like sounds like the consensus RB1 in this draft. The reason I got him that low is because of the injury. He tore his ACL in November. It takes a full year to recover from ACL. I don't expect anything out of him in his first rookie year. And I think I kind of have a bad taste in my mouth from drafting JMO off an injury, waiting, and then never it pan out. So maybe I'm a little biased there, but I've got him down because of the ACL, down to 3. But his tape did look awesome. I'm a big Texas guy, president of the Longhorn Club. So I've watched plenty of Brooks. He looks awesome. I just dropped him because of the injury. Blake Corum, I'm going to be Blake Corum's biggest hater. The size is what does it for me. I don't think that size at running back translates to the NFL. I saw some stat out there of like running backs below Blake Corum's height and like what they did in the NFL. It was like Darren Sproles and I don't know, Austin Eckler, that type of deal. But Austin Eckler obviously comes to the receiving side. I didn't see a lot of receiving out of Blake Corum. So I'm Blake Corum's biggest hater, even though I think he's kind of high on most boards. And then I threw Bucky Orving in there at number 5. He was the last running back I watched. Don't love him between the tackles, but he has elite pass catching upside. 5'10", 195, so kind of a smaller dude, but had 56 receptions last year, which led college football FBS. So I could throw him in at 5 just for the receiving upside alone there.
Yeah, so I'll start with I'll talk about just because Jonathan Brooks, he's my RB1. You guys both have him at 3. So with running backs in general, and really just all my NFL prospects, a big thing that I like is just watching them play and just not even really paying attention to like the outcome of the plays, but just seeing how they look out there and if they look like NFL players, if they look like they belong. That's why I love watching the preseason, because I actually want to see if these guys look like they belong on a field with other NFL players. That's what's so important to me. So a lot of
Just
these
eye
running
test.
backs, especially these bigger guys like Trey Benson and Braylon Allen, like I like that look. And like you said with Trey Benson, like he just looks and seems and plays like the guy that is most likely out of this class to, have like a 20 carry game or something like that. So even if the stats aren't necessarily there, I just like the build. He's like 6'1", he's huge. And that's why I like Audric Estime as well. I think that's how you say his last name. I'm not sure. But he's that same size as Trey Benson. And like, I just watch him play at Notre Dame, and like he just like, his ability to like hit the hole, take off downfield, and like actually like outrun guys, make big plays. That's why I like him a lot. So I have him ranked pretty high. But yeah, Pete, I mean, with Blake Corum, I'm kind of back and forth on it as well. Like he is so small, but he is a guy that just like gets the job done in those situations. And I think that, maybe he doesn't have like a massive fantasy upside, but I feel like he could be a guy that's like a touchdown vulture. And, if he's not putting up crazy yards, he's still, maybe getting 10 touchdown season or something like that. And I mean, who knows if he goes to a team like the Chargers with Jim Harbaugh, then, I feel like his stock goes to the moon, maybe to a point where I don't want to pay the price to get him. But Amaral, I mean, I'm talking about all this and I'm just kind of scanning everybody's board, and I can't help but notice you have Will Shipley as your RB1. Do you want to take us into your mind on that one?
I mean, just like running backs in general, like I'm always going to chase the receiving upside. I think he's the best pure receiving back in this draft. I think he was just kind of underutilized or misutilized in that Clemson offense, which I think is kind of just non-existent really. The scheme kind of sucks since or I guess you could say John Watson and Trevor Lawrence were the scheme. And the whole program's kind of going to shit. But I just think they've misused Shipley. Again, he's not the biggest guy either, but I really like the receiving upside there. I think that's a pretty consistent theme throughout these rankings, other than like Corum. These guys can really catch the ball. I guess SDMA is probably not the greatest receiver either, but Trey Benson, I think he's very complete as well. Pete, I like that. You have him number 1. And then Jonathan Brooks, same thing. Like I don't know why I'm factoring in the ACL. Like I think Jonathan Brooks is the most talented running back in the class in my opinion. And like I'm treating the ACL injury like it's fucking 1982, and it's like a career threatening injury. Like he's probably going to be on the field sooner than later, and he could contribute, I guess, towards the end of next season. But I mean that again, Shipley's number 1 for me. That might be a bit aggressive, but I've always liked Shipley coming out of high school. I've always liked his game. He played as a true freshman in the ACC, and he's a very good receiving back.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I was trying to figure out where I wanted to put him. I think I might have initially had him like 9th or 10th, and I just bumped him up a little bit because of that. Where I mean, I was looking through his game log, and I was shocked to see that he didn't really have like that crazy of receiving stats, because I always just had him in my mind as a guy that could get it done, and I think that's because that's what he was kind of advertised as when he was coming in. So, like I like that receiving upside as well. Yeah, and like you said about Jonathan Brooks, to me, he is just the best all-around running back, and especially in a rookie draft and where he's probably going to be going. Like, we're not talking about him going in the top 5 or anything like that. So I think assuming that he gets, maybe some second-round draft capital, as long as he's a good day 2 pick, I would love to be, in a position to draft him, because I think that it's going to be one of those where people are going to undervalue him because of the ACL. But from a dynasty standpoint, it's like, whatever. I'll, kind of just like eat shit on that for however long it takes, and hopefully he comes back. Like you said, this isn't the 80s anymore or anything like that. Like, people do come back from these injuries. So I think once he gets into that opportunity and he starts taking over a backfield, he's the best all-around back. So that's why I have him as my number 1. Yeah, I mean, another guy that I have that I don't think I'm looking right now, I don't think anybody else has, is Monty Bailey from TCU. And he's a guy where I just watch him. I mean, he's a small guy as well, but he's like so fast, and he's not like one of those that relies on just like, juking everybody. And, in the NFL, I think guys will just wrap him up. Like he's a guy that can just hit the hole and take off. I feel like he's a guy that might be a riser, through some of these draft conversations, kind of similar to like A-Chain was, where people like, people start to realize like, this kid's just like a playmaker. He's so fast. Nobody can catch up to him. So I think that Bailey's a guy to keep an eye on as well. But overall, I mean, I know a lot of people are down on this running back class. I think that at cost, I think that as long as that ADP stays um, low, I guess, I don't know, high or low, how to talk about it, but as long as it stays back, as long as people aren't starting to, take these guys in the first round, and if like the second round and even the third round is like littered with opportunities to take these guys, like I actually like this running back class a lot, but if their value starts to rise kind of because of scarcity, then, I'm probably out on them as a whole. But I don't know. You guys got anybody else you want to shout out in the running backs?
I mean, I just like. I mean, I like that this class that there's not like a consensus. Like we
Yeah.
have three different running backs as our RB1, and then like Pete, everyone on your list is on both of our lists, but like Cannon, you got Bailey, Jace McClellan, Marshawn Lloyd, and then like I have Cody Schrader, Ray Davis, Dylan Johnson. So like there's a lot of fluidity to these rankings, and I do enjoy when there's not a consensus. I think it makes like us talking about it, it makes it this more entertaining, and then it makes the lead up to the draft more entertaining, and seeing what teams value specific skill sets.
Yeah, and that's the thing too, talking about how, there's so much different between all of our lists. But like I said, if they get too expensive, then of course, like I don't want to pay up for these guys. But if they're going to be second or third round picks, like there were other guys that I was considering putting on this list. Like to me, the class goes a lot deeper than they get credit for. Sure, there's not that, Jameer Gibbs, Bijan Robinson type prospect where, people want to get them because they're just like, obviously going to be immediate hits. But I think that a lot of these guys, they end up in the right backfield, so they can have some good situations. I mean, I snuck McClellan in there as well because he's just an Alabama running back. I feel like these Saban guys always find a role. They always maximize what their skill set is. Like they might not always be, a top tier guy, but even look at like how Damian Harris was able to put up, a top 10 season just because he got that touchdown volume, anything like that. So I think a guy like McClellan can just fall into a role and maybe land, some decent volume and be effective. So I think at the right price, I think that if they're cheap, if they're talking second, third round of our rookie drafts, I like a lot of these guys.
If you had to guess right now, do you think? I mean, I think it's pretty wide consensus a running back doesn't go in the first round of the NFL draft. If you had to guess right now, do you think a running back goes in the first round of the Friends Who Gamble rookie draft?
I think so. I think it's a good bet
Yeah.
because I think there's going to be an RB1, whoever that first running back taking in the real draft is, they're going to gain some steam, especially if some guys start going in the second round of the real draft. So, I think that if I'm making that bet, I would say yes, just because I could see from 10 through 12. I mean, I don't know who has each one of those picks, but I think that there will be teams that are maybe interested in, if if they don't currently have those picks, maybe they want to jump somebody, try and get it. But I think that we're looking maybe sneaking into the end of the first, but I think early second is where if you're looking to get a running back and hoping to get the RB1 in the class, you're kind of, feeling really good about having one of those picks.
Yeah, I think somebody will get into like if like just like hypothetically, if Cleveland moves on from Nick Chubb and they draft Trey Benson or Braylon Allen like in the top 50 picks in the NFL draft, like I think somebody's definitely going to want to like chase that scheme and chase that player and that fit and take them. But I think it definitely won't happen until like picks 10 through 12. I think those probably 11 or 12 are probably the realistic shots there, because we have the at least three quarterbacks, probably four, going to go. Plus Bowers is five, and then we only need
Three wide
seven,
receivers.
seven receivers to round up the round one. So it'll be close, but I think somebody will get in there, pick
Yeah,
11
and
or
I
12.
think it's also just a matter of like how far down the receiver list do you go until you're like, you know what, I kind of
Right.
have to take the
Right.
first running back taken in the NFL draft. So, I think when you're starting to look at like wide receiver 6 or 7, and I'll switch over the wide receiver rankings now, but yeah, I think once you start looking at that, you're like, maybe I got to take the positional value here and take that top running back. So, all right, let's get into the wide receivers. I think we'll start at the top. I mean, the top four guys, it can be in different orders, but I think that we're pretty locked into that. That seems to be the consensus. I'd be really surprised if that actually changed. I think that Ryan Thomas is kind of locked in as that wide receiver 4, and I think rightfully so. I think that he's just a guy that was outshined by Malik Neighbors, who was putting up a crazy season, put up one of the best LSU receiving careers ever, and LSU was a wide receiver factory. So, I think that he got outshined a little bit, but I mean, he put up some great stats. He showed some great ability, especially as like a downfield threat. So it feels like he's locked in at that wide receiver 4. I don't know, Pete, how do you want to start it off? I say we start with the top 4. Do you want to just take us through, how you're doing it? I feel like, okay, the two of us have the same. Amaral has Odunze and Neighbors switch. Actually, Amaral, how about you talk about that? How are you choosing between Rome and Malik?
It's tough. I just think he's better. Like I think they do a lot of things, at a high level. It'd be so. Let me backtrack a little bit. I would have any of these three, like obviously Marvin Harrison, and then I'd have Adunze and Neighbors ahead of JSN, Addison, or Zay from last year. So
I like that.
I don't know if you guys are on board with that or not, but that's kind of how I would rank these guys. Like I think there's a decent chance. Like it probably won't happen because teams are going to want to take tackles and quarterbacks. But I think all three of these guys, Harrison, Adunze, Neighbors, I think they're all top 10 talents in this draft. Um, I just like the size and the physicality of Adunze and the ability to win contested catches. But like what Neighbors can do with the ball in his hands is pretty special. So I definitely can't fault you for having Neighbors over Adunze. Like it's really a coin flip for me. It's more a 2 and a 2A rather than 2 and 3. But I love both of them. And obviously Harrison as well.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I was watching and like, it kind of goes back and forth every day between Neighbors and Rome, which one I have it too. To me, when I'm just watching their tape, it's just Neighbors, the way that he can just take off with the ball and just completely burn everybody is kind of what separates him from me. But like you said, to me, they are basically equals. And as I was saying, I'm flipping back and forth, but I think that Rome is just so good at getting open, but he's also so good at winning those 50-50 balls. So it's like there's really no way to kind of stop him. So I think that if you're looking for something maybe a little more reliable, I think Rome is kind of the way to go. But I think, when I'm looking at, my team specifically, I'm thinking I don't really feel like I have a guy like Malik Neighbors that can just, turn on the Jets like that, plant his foot in the ground, catch the ball in the middle of the field, spin around, and then just take off for like a 40-yard touchdown. So to me, that's what gives him the slight edge. But yeah, I think overall, this top 3, I think they're closer than, Neighbors and Adunze are getting credit for. And that's not a knock on Marvin Harrison. I think it's more just propping them up. And I think that, like you were saying, in a lot of other draft classes, these are guys that we're talking about as like the consensus wide receiver 1. So, I think I'm just giving them their flowers a little bit. And I do feel like Marvin Harrison, there is a little bit, and, overrated does not mean bad. But I think that people are so quick to just make him like this generational, can't miss prospect like that, where it's like, oh my God, he's so much better, that people almost get offended when you just try and say, well, I think Neighbors and Adunze might be, up there and worthy of being in that discussion with him. I think the thing that separates Harrison is his floor, though. I feel like he actually cannot fail. That doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to step in and be a Jamar Chase, a Justin Jefferson, like we've seen. But I just feel like he has by far the safest floor. I don't know. Do you guys agree with me on that?
No, I think Marvin Harrison's a generational prospect, is absolutely can't miss, and he's the next Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase.
That's
I
fair.
agree that he can't fail. Like he runs routes like his dad, but he's fucking 6'4". So like
Yeah.
I don't understand. I mean, I don't get how he could possibly fail in the NFL.
Yeah, and that's
And
my
like
thing. Like, I feel like he's going to be, 1,000-yard guy, everything like that. I just don't think that we should be so quick. I feel like people are just so quick to do that in general, right? Like Bijan Robinson, and this is not a knock on him because he put up a really good rookie season, but people were like, oh, he's, hasn't even been drafted yet, and he's already RB1, everything like that. And I think people are too quick to crown these guys. We have a lot of really good NFL players in the league right now. So like I said, it's not a knock on Marvin Harrison. I think that it's more of just like, let's not be so quick to put these massive expectations on him, because then you're just almost setting yourself up for disappointment when he puts up a really good career, but maybe he doesn't necessarily reach those heights. So, I mean, he's still my wide receiver 1. Like I said, I feel like he by far has the safest floor. And I think that's what just locks him into that spot, because I don't think that he can fail. But yeah, at the same time, I just feel like people are too quick to be like, oh, he's going to put up a 1,500 yard season, 12 touchdowns, everything like that. It might take a little bit of time to get there.
Yeah, I think
Um,
it's a really good take. I think it's a really good take. I obviously am biased because I paid what I did for Marv, and I've kind of already locked that in, like we talked about earlier, I guess. But I do think that there's a clear gap between Marvin and Malik when I've seen a lot of blurred lines between the two of them, like 1A, 1B lately.
Yeah, and I think that it's it's definitely a hot take if somebody wants to put one of them over him. Like I said, I think it's more of just I'm not even saying that they're the same tier as him. I think it's more just I think the gap's a little bit smaller than people are maybe giving them credit for, and that's really just all I got. Let's move on
Last
to the past
last thing
that top.
I did want to add with Rome real quick. I think we've talked before. I mean, it's the third time three of us have done this rundown. I think we all follow Daniel Jeremiah,
Mhm.
pretty closely as one of our most trusted analysts. He does have Rome Odunze as his third ranked prospect overall, ahead of Malik and also ahead of Drake May and Jaden Daniels. I thought that was interesting just to shout out there.
Yeah, and like I said, between the two, between Neighbors and Rome, I do think that he's maybe the safer prospect just because, he's so good at getting open and then he's also so good at winning those 50-50 balls. I think that he's a guy that's just going to be so trustworthy. And then, when it comes to Neighbors, I think that it's just that big playability and the way that he can just turn it on. It's just like, I mean, how can you not, kind of just be mesmerized by that? All right, let's get into it because there's a little more variance when we get past that top four. Uh, I don't know. Where do we want to start? You want to shout any guys out? Pete, you got any guys you want to talk about?
I think Keon Coleman is a very, very polarizing run wide receiver. KB, he is not even on your board. I've got him at 6, and Amaral, you've got him at 8. So I think that's a good. I think it's some interesting things to say about Keon Coleman. I want to know why he's not on your board.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of just tried to stick it to 10. I mean, I think after that he could be in the discussion for that 11 through 15 spot. I don't know exactly where I put him. I just kind of cut myself off at 10. I had, probably 7 or 8 other guys on the list that I just, didn't include. So, I think that he's an interesting prospect because of his athletic ability, right? He was a two-sport player. He was playing basketball at Michigan State. Then he transfers down and he can show, and he's shown that he can, make some crazy plays and he's really good. To me, I don't know. I don't see it as like a complete receiver. I think that there is a little bit of a project aspect to him. He feels like a guy that maybe, slides down into the late second or the third round, in the NFL draft. And then, he goes off early in his career and people are like, oh, how could you let him go to this? And then, the season ends and he's just another rookie receiver. I feel like he's going to have those big games, but I feel like he still has a lot to learn. So, when I'm making my top 10, he just didn't make the list. You have like a rebuttal? I don't know. You're
Yeah,
really
no,
into
no, no.
it. That's your wide receiver
um,
6. I thought you'd maybe stand up
um,
for him.
I was no, I'm not going to stand up for him. I'm going to tear him down. I was trying to put him as low as I could. My problem with him is he's a 50-50 contested catch guy, and I didn't see him separate at all. Like, not only is he not separating, he's not separating in the ACC against ACC corners. Like, he was winning these 50-50 balls, absolutely mossing dudes, and like kind of a fun highlight tape to watch. But I didn't think he was crazy fast. I don't think he's a lethal route runner. I like George Pickens popped in my head. Doesn't really separate very well, but makes these crazy, insane 50-50 ball catches. I'm not a Keon Coleman guy. I think the last 2 years we've done it, 3 years we've done this. We've kind of all gravitated to more of like the pure polished route runners over like these 50-50 ball can catch contested catch guys. So I've got him at 6, but he's on the hot seat to slide down for me.
Yeah, and I mean, I think like the upside is definitely there. I think it's more just, as I was talking about with Marvin Harrison, when I'm kind of looking at this, I think that floor is starting to become a lot more important to me than ceiling because I mean, I think a lot of these guys have like, crazy ceilings, what they could become. But if I'm, investing in a guy, especially in the rookie draft and, for a dynasty team, I want somebody that I know I can trust and that I can rely on. And I just feel like the guys that I have in my top 10, are just more reliable as prospects. Amaral, that's your wide receiver 8. How are you feeling about Coleman?
Yeah, I mean, I actually kind of like that Pickens comp, like, but Coleman, I just can't. The upside we saw last year, week 1 against LSU, 9 for 122 and 3 touchdowns. So, like, when I think about Keon Coleman, I'm thinking about that with that. I'm thinking about him with that upside in mind, and I tend to play it safer as well. And like, I think you can make a real case that Roman Wilson, if you were going just by floor, he could be wide receiver 4. Like, I think he's just going to be a really good pro for a long time. He's going to get open. He's going to catch 80 plus balls. Like, Michigan just didn't ask a lot of him. But when they did, he got open and made plays. Senior Bowl week, got open, made plays. Like, that's just what he's going to do. He's probably worked his way into middle of day two. He might be a top 50 pick at this point. So I think he's going to have a great career, and I think he's going to be a guy where he has a high floor, but his floor and ceiling are pretty close together.
That's Roman Wilson, you're saying, right?
Roman Wilson, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a guy too. I was watching him, at Michigan. I would tune in for the Michigan game most weeks, I'd say, at least when they were playing, like their Big Ten opponents and everything. And yeah, I mean, he was a guy where I'd watch, and I was like, I feel like he's like pretty damn good. I think that it's really just that Michigan offense and the way that they're so committed to the run that I think it holds back some guys. And we saw like a Nico Collins. He was a really good prospect coming out, really interesting prospect, I should say. And kind of just flew under the radar because they're just not throwing the ball like that. And that was another reason why I kind of think that JJ McCarthy, the him getting the hype, it's a little more warranted because he wasn't being asked to do a ton. He wasn't being asked to shoulder the load. So, maybe that's on them and maybe like they're not commanding that workload, but knowing Harbaugh and like how he's coached his teams, how he's run his offense, like we know that they're going to, try and facilitate everything through the run game. So, I'm not going to knock a guy, a receiver, for not putting up insane stats. But like you said, he's just always open. And I just felt like, I saw highlight after highlight from senior week or the Senior Bowl where whether it's drills or whether it's in a game, he's shaking a guy and he's getting all this, all this grass in front of him to make, plays and everything. So, a guy like Wilson, a guy like McConkey, I feel like they're kind of in that same boat where I think that they can turn in really good careers. I think that they have opportunities to, maybe fall into some good volume and put some things up. But at the same time, I do think that we also have to be a little more realistic about, their total outlook. Pete, you got any guys you want to shout out?
Yeah, I want to go about to Adonai AD Mitchell. I've got him at 5. KB got him at 7. Amaral, you've got him at 9. I thought he was a very, very good route runner. I watched one specific game against Alabama where he had 3 catches in man coverage against Kool-Aid McKinstry, like the top cornerback. I think he's the top cornerback off the board, or projected to be. And he burned him for like 80 yards and 2 touchdowns. It was only 3 catches, but like burning him in man coverage, I thought like just a really good route runner. The last 3 years, I think I just said it, but I just gravitate way more to these route runner guys than these bigger bodies that are contested catch guys. And I think AD Mitchell is one of those route runner guys that can do really well in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, he's a guy where, like, when I watch him, right, he's like 6'4", he's so smooth the way that he plays. But when I was looking like at his stats, and especially I was looking through his game logs, he just doesn't have many big games. I was kind of just like, where are the stats at? And I think that that's why, I initially had him higher. I think I initially had him as my wide receiver 5. I bumped him down a little bit because he looks the part, but then I'm like, why is he not putting up bigger numbers? I mean, you are the Longhorn Club guy. Maybe you can talk me into him a little bit more. But yeah, I was just looking. It was just like, he had like some games where he popped off, but he had a lot of like 2-3 catch games, 30, 40 yards. There's just a lot left to be desired there.
Amaral, what do you think about AD Mitchell?
I mean, I'm a fan of his as well. Like for most of the season, I had Xavier Worthy as the highest ranked Texas receiver, but I just think like the size is what has won me over, and flip flopping Mitchell and Worthy. I still have them close by here. I've met number 9 and number 11, so they are still close by on that board. And I think like really, I feel comfortable with like the top 7. And then like 8 through 13, I'm expecting that to shift quite a bit between now and when we draft.
Yeah, I mean, like I was saying, I feel like the top 4 is locked in, and then I think that there's so much that can change because we're gonna have to see, how the NFL is evaluating these guys, what they think of them, everything like that. I see that you have Troy Franklin really high. Pete, you have him at 7. He also didn't make my top 10. Amaral, what has you, so into Troy Franklin?
I just love him after the catch. I think he's like kind of, I don't want to say poor man's because that's like disrespectful to him. He's not like a fucking shit bum, late day 3 pick. Like he could go, anywhere from 25 to 40, I would say. Like I kind of expect him to go in that range. But I love his big playability, his ability after the catch, similar to Malik Neighbors. So that's who I was going to say. Poor man's Malik Neighbors. But I thought that was a little disrespectful to him. But I have him at number 5, and I think he's pretty close to my top 4. Like he's not far off from Brian Thomas. I'm a big Troy Franklin fan. I was going into the year, and he did nothing to really change my mind throughout this past season. So I'm a big Troy Franklin fan, and Malachi Corley as well too. Like he's like the the comp's obvious with him. I think everybody has the Debo comp where he's just like a beast with the ball in his hands, very physical. Like you don't see that physicality often out of receivers.
Yeah, Corley's getting a lot of that hype now too, and I do think that it's it's a small school and people are starting to dig deeper into that type of film. So I think that's all that it really is. But to me, I mean, Steve Smith just loves him, and I like Steve Smith's wide receiver evaluations a lot. So I mean, a guy like him is like all in on Malachi Corley. I'm like, all right, I'm gonna shut up and listen to that. Troy Franklin, yeah, he was a guy that I just watched, and I feel like everybody uses the offensive system and everything to try and, knock Bo Nix. But then it's like, all right, I mean, does it also apply to the wide receivers as well? And yeah, I mean, he's just like, a tall, skinny burner. I mean, there is more to his game than that. But I was just, watching him. It's just like, I don't know. I don't know if that's necessarily a guy that, I love when I'm putting my top 10 together. And, I just start thinking of, what Tyquan Thornton was coming out, and he played for a green school as well, and I just start having flashbacks like that, and it just turned me off a little bit. So I mean, Troy Franklin's a guy, maybe I'll dig a little bit deeper into him. I think that if he does go in that 25 to 40 range like you were talking about, then I'm gonna have to take him a little more seriously as well. But yeah, I think just overall play style, it's just like it wasn't what I'm really looking for. So when I'm putting my top 10 together, he just didn't make the list. um
I was gonna get that Steve Smith takeoff too. I really like his and like just breaking down wide receivers. I love his picks, and I saw the clip on Malachi Corley, and I had to put him in there just solely because of Steve Smith. And then the other question I want to ask, which I feel like we said we were going to get to, is how many wide receivers come off the board before you think you take Brock Bowers, or where you slotting Brock Bowers into this list?
I think I'd put him. I think I'd put him between. I think I'd put him before Brian Thomas. I think that you just got to think about how hyped he's been as a tight end prospect. I think that in the real life, in our rookie draft, that would put him what at least we're talking like 6-7 range. I think that that's appropriate for a guy like him as well. Because I am a little. I think that it's all right to be a little wary of, maybe overspending on a rookie tight end, just because we saw, where a guy like Kyle Pitts was going and how that's turned out, as opposed to, like Laporta being a second round pick or something like that. So I think people maybe will be a little iffy on that, but I think also it's just rightfully so, right? We're looking at quarterbacks in the super flex draft. We got 3 really good wide receiver prospects. I think that he slots in right after that. I think that if you really need wide receiver, then Brian Thomas is a good pick, but I think that's where the argument kind of is for me. I don't know about you, Amaral.
Yeah, I'd have him. I'd have him behind the top 3 receivers. And I would have him like way ahead of any running backs as well. Me personally, like I don't have much interest in starting 2 tight ends. So like with Laporta, he's probably lower. Like if it came down to it, if I'm at like I have 108 and 111, so if like he's there at either pick, like I'd probably take a guy like Brian Thomas or Troy Franklin over Bowers, just because I have Laporta. But just generally speaking, I think he's pretty comfortably slots in after a Dunze and Neighbors for me.
Yeah, yeah. Pete, where do you have Matt?
I would have him after Brian Thomas, so I guess like right around that same area, but just after Brian Thomas. I think he's going to be the most insane value steal of this draft. Amaral just said he probably wouldn't take him at 1.8. You've got what, 4 quarterbacks, 3 wide receivers over him for sure. Amaral's not taking him at 1.8. This is the best tight end prospect of all time that only has a shot at going at 1.9. It feels like, which is just I don't know. I feel like that's crazy to me. It's such a steal.
Yeah, yeah.
And
No,
I guess
agree
I'll
with
also
that.
say the tight end market is very saturated right now. I feel like 2 years ago it was literally Kelsey, Andrews, and everyone else. And then Hawk comes up, Laporta comes up. You got all these rookies that come in last year. Njoku breaks out last year. McBride comes out of nowhere. Yep, McBride, exactly. McBride comes out of nowhere. Like there was literally only like 2 dominant tight ends. Now it feels like as long as you got one of like the top 9 guys, you're probably in good shape. So it's just kind of crazy that like we've been talking about Bowers for 3 years, best tight end prospect ever. And he's not even going to go in the top 9 picks of our rookie draft, just because of how the market is right now and the rookies we've got, coming in this year at quarterback and wide receiver.
Yeah, no, yeah, I agree, and I think that is just kind of the market resetting itself. Like I said, I think people are maybe just they feel a little burned from Kyle Pitts and everything like that, and it definitely is something to think about. There isn't like
Get off my guy Pitts' back. All right. He's got a new offense this year. He's going to be good.
Yeah, no, it's true, but I think but it's not even criticizing. I'm not calling him dog shit. I'm just saying that it's like look, he was like a top 6 or 7 pick in our draft, and I think that I think I was the one that took him, and I got 1,000-yard season out of him. But I think like in hindsight, you're like, well, shit. Like if I looked back at who went after that, I'd probably rather take them, right? So, I think that that's all it is. But I do think that Bowers is a guy that the way that he plays. He can stand in there, he can block. I think he's more of an all-around tight end, so I think he's a little bit safer of a bet there. So yeah, I think if you're getting him in the middle of the first round, I think you're getting some pretty insane value, especially if that's a position of need. So, some other guys that we can talk about. I got is it Leggett?
Leggett,
Leggett?
yeah.
Leggett's is a
Yeah.
bar that I used to go to on the shore. And then Jalen Polk, I have them as my 5 and 6. I mean, the more that I watch Leggett, it's just like, what is there not to like? I mean, he's a physical player. He gets shit done. He can, make a play downfield. He can get some yak on a short catch. And then Jalen Polk is the same way. And, the kind of talking about Brian Thomas, maybe he isn't quite at that level, but it's like, I think everybody was just so focused on Rome that it's like, I'm watching him play. It's like, what is there not to like? I mean, he's also just always open. He put up a ton of massive games this past season. So I think that he's a really good player. He's got some decent size at 6'2" as well. So I think that he's a guy where it's like, he's gonna, suddenly be like an early second round pick. And it's like, oh shit, yeah, why weren't we talking about this guy? Like he was nasty at Washington right next to Roma Dunze. So those are two guys that I'm really into. And then I think that I've already covered everybody else. I don't know, Amaral, Pete, you got anybody else you want to shout out?
No, I feel good. I mean, I feel like we didn't really touch about Lad McConkey, but everything I heard out of Senior Bowl, Lad McConkey, and Roman Wilson were virtually unguardable. So I guess I'll throw that in there about Lad.
Yeah, he's a guy that he's just getting like a ton of like, insane hype. It almost feels like the way that people latched on to Jonathan Mingo last year, where it's like, hey, like this guy's also good. And then he gets, hyped to the moon. And, it didn't necessarily pan out in his first year. We'll see how, things play out beyond that. But yeah, I mean, I think that, around 10, that 10 to 13 range is appropriate for him right now. We'll see, where he goes in the NFL draft. But I think that he's a guy that he can have a decent floor. I don't know if the ceiling is there. I mean, I think that of course, like if he can land in a good spot where he's getting a ton of volume, then he can really turn it into something. But it's like, he wasn't necessarily setting the world on fire at Georgia. He was a really good receiver. He was able to make some really good plays, have some huge games. But, compared to the guys that, I think we all have ranked ahead of him, I don't think he necessarily stacks up.
I'll just say like Georgia's similar to Michigan though, where like they rely so much on the run game. Like that's why it's like guys like Jermaine Burton and AD Mitchell have transferred out of Georgia, even though they're winning so much and they're the best program. It's just like that offense doesn't, really translate to success and putting the best film on tape for the NFL.
Yeah, no, for sure. And we've seen some good products come out of Georgia as well. But yeah, I think, like I said, I think just like 10 is just like a good ranking for him. I think he can move up a little bit more, but I think that, eventually there's just like a wall where it's like, I don't know if I can put him up, above some of these guys. I mean, I think initially I had him ranked pretty high and then I was like, what am I doing? I mean, some of these guys can like truly go just fucking nuts with like the traits that they have. So I think that, as prospects, I think we just need to be a little more realistic with him. And especially when we're talking fantasy, what he's capable of compared to some of these other guys. But all right, we'll leave it at that. I mean, these were our 0.0 rankings. We just wanted to get something on paper, and I think that we got the combine coming in a couple weeks. We got the draft in April, I believe it's in. So I think we have some checkpoints that we'll hit. We'll come back in. I think we'll probably do a post combine one. See where the hype's at with that, see where our minds are at with some of these rankings and how they change. So I think we'll start a new, or we'll keep this list. And then, we'll do post combine rankings on a different list, everything. So we can, have more of a side by side comparison, but we'll leave it at that. I think that, for the show, I think we're just going to be doing draft content for most of the off season. And then, maybe we'll, when the market opens and some free agent signings hit, we'll start talking a little more about that. But that's the Lex and Pete show. We will be back after the combine. All right.
Guys, I've been holding diarrhea back for like